progress.
The only one that has it.
Okay, everyone. It's time. All right, welcome to this third presentation meeting for our 2023 budget meetings. First up is Ithaca Area Economic Development, and we have Heather McDaniel here. You can find this on page 5-24 of your book.
Hang with me for a second.
Oh, we're good at hanging, no worries.
Hey, can everyone see? Yes, we're good. Well, I'm flanked by two power women, so I'm in good company. Thank you.
No, we're sitting over here.
Many power women and men in the room tonight. So thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to be here and present to you this evening. I have a short presentation for you. At Ithaca Area Economic Development, we are dedicated to building a thriving and sustainable economy that improves the quality of life in Tompkins County by fostering the growth of business and employment. Our vision is a flourishing economy with exciting, innovative firms that inspire and attract a talented workforce. I also want to mention that Danielle Szabo, my Director of Workforce Innovation, is with us virtually tonight, so we're both here. So at IAED, we have a 5-year strategy that really focuses on delivering customized economic development solutions in 3 key areas. The first being direct services to mostly traded sector industry businesses, manufacturers, high-tech companies, making sure that they have all the supports necessary to start here, stay here, and grow here. Our second pillar is our newest pillar that we added over the past year is workforce development. We really see ourselves as a convener and a collaborator, ensuring that there are inclusive pathways to quality employment opportunities right here in Ithaca and Tompkins County. Our third pillar, economic development leadership. That's sort of the everything else bucket. We represent the needs and the interests of the business community locally, regionally, at the state level, even nationally sometimes. We get involved in projects and strategies that support the needs of the business community. Many of those needs are needs that you focus on all the time. Housing, quality of life, broadband, energy, those are some of the big ones for us. I just want to remind everybody about our funding model. We were founded in 1964. We've pretty much been funded about the same way. We strive to really have 3 diverse sources of funding that provide for a sustainable model over time for us. Little dip there for a few years. The IDA had quite a bit of fund balance and the county dropped off a little bit. But overall, pretty much since 1964, and you can't see the top one. I'm sorry, the colors are a little bad there. You can see it over there. Our 3 sources of funding, we strive for about 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. County funding, investors, which are companies and organizations that believe in our mission and benefit from the work that we do. And then the third, fees for services, primarily from the IDA and the local development corporation. So in December, the county did create a task force and spent 3 or 4 months looking at the return on investment that is provided by supporting IAED. You unanimously approved another 5 years of funding that would run from 2024 to 2028. and it's about 26% of our projected budget with our projected work plan over the next 5 years. So at that time, you did say that if we had additional programs or things that we wanted to accomplish, that we were welcome to come back and ask for an over-target request. Thus my presence here this evening. I'm here to talk a little bit about our request. It's a $75,000 really to dedicate to staffing at IAED to grow the Direct to Work program. So what is Direct to Work? It is not just a job training program. It's an effort to build an inclusive career pathway which requires a really strong collaboration between businesses, education, community partners, and community-wide resource partners. IAED is playing that critical role in being the convener, the collaborator, building out all ends of this program. We're not doing the entire program, but it takes all the partners to bring them all together so that it works from beginning to end. You can see on this slide some of the graduates from one of our cohorts of Direct to Work this year. So the nuts and bolts of Direct to Work, it's not just a job training program. It starts with recruitment. We are collaborating with partners to identify unemployed, underemployed members of our community that would benefit from long-term quality career opportunities. So that's the beginning piece, is the recruitment piece. You have to get the people into the program. And then there's the assessment and training piece. You can't take everybody, you have to meet everybody where they're at, and sometimes they're not ready for training. So there's the assessment, there's a training module, and then there's the matchmaking and referral that leads to employment. All of the assessment and training is directly guided by our manufacturing partners. This is our first pathway program. It's in the manufacturing sector, so you can see there are some of our partners. I think Encodema 3D has added. We might have a few more at this point as well. But again, not just job training, it's the beginning, the middle, and the end is long-term employment opportunities. And I just can't stress enough, it's not just job training. It is really providing that inclusive pathway for participants. Wherever they come in, they can go along the system. So we start with recruitment and then assessment, community referrals into our preparation phase. Preparation could be remedial services for those that don't quite meet the assessment guidelines that have been identified in conjunction with our employer partners. It could be any type of barrier mitigation. We have Law New York coming in, helping people understand what kind of record they might have and how that might impact them in an interview, how to mitigate some of those barriers. It could be childcare or transportation. And then once they're ready, they're referred into our skills-based training program that not only has a nationally recognized manufacturing credential, it also has a significant amount of soft skills training, working in a team, showing up on time, communication skills, modeling behaviors that are directly that the manufacturers have directly said these are what kinds of skills are going to make people successful in our manufacturing floors. And then the training program also has a direct employment and career navigation piece. We work with them on resumes. We go out and visit all the employers so you can sort of see the different cultures and the different types of work throughout the community. which after the preparation phase leads to direct placement. And again, I said we're building the manufacturing program out, and our plan is to expand access to that program for more individuals over the next 5 years, as well as modeling the program in the construction trades industry. We are looking at both a union and a non-union track. So that's really our goal, to grow that direct-to-work program. And growing that program means that you have more unemployed, underemployed individuals in this community that are often availing themselves of significant social service and resource dollars. Once they get into employment, it reduces the need for those services. We had one gentleman during our spring cohort that was offered a job. I believe he's making $22 an hour. Within 8 weeks, he no longer needed any social service supports. So that's really the reason that we're doing this. And of course, to keep our employers here, because if they can't get those entry-level employees and start training them into long-term careers, they start to look at going elsewhere where they might be able to find workforce. I did hand out for you a copy of our Pathways to Manufacturing impacts over the past year. So you'll see sort of how that process works. Through our orientation processes and our recruitment processes, we had 111 people that were interested. We had 41 that came through and were assessed. We served 34 people. There were a few people that came in and they had the skills necessary that we could skip the prepare phase and place them directly with employers and into employment. But you see the numbers start to fall off. We've got 11 graduated. We've got 11 that received a $500 stipend and their certified manufacturing associate certificate, which is that nationally recognized certificate. I want to draw your attention to the barriers. These are the real live barriers that we're finding that, significantly drop the numbers from assessment to served to participating in or graduating from our program. Of note, 27% of folks that came in and either signed up and were assessed did not complete the program or were not invited to the program. 27% of those were due to childcare and transportation issues. So we know what some of those barriers are. What we're asking for is additional funding so that we can hire a staff person that can help us really build out not only that first recruitment and a recruitment process, working with the housing authority, the veterans associations, the social service agencies, all those agencies to build that referral pipeline, but then also to work on the remediation services. We know that the biggest barriers are housing, childcare, and transportation. So we're an economic development agency, but if we don't crack this issue, we're not going to have employers with these great jobs. So that's why we're doing it, and that's why we're asking for these resources from the county to help us really grow out both manufacturing and then the construction and trades consortiums. Our projected outcomes for the next 5-year period are that we're going to serve 100% of our participants that are served will be low to moderate income individuals. We're going to train 200 individuals, place 165 of them in permanent employment, and we are going to track retention rates at 30 days, 90 days, 6 months, and 1 year. Overall, we want to see a 75% retention rate. This program directly aligns with the county's comprehensive plan goal of providing opportunities for residents to develop skills to obtain high-quality employment. And that's my request and my overview for this evening. I want to thank you so much for the opportunity to be here, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Okay, thank you, Heather. Questions for Heather? Randy, and then Shauna.
Thank you. Thanks, Heather. How many people are currently signed up, and what will happen if you don't get this OTR?
We won't be able to build out that recruitment process as quickly as we would like to. We just started gearing up for our October cohort. So we've started meeting with some of those referral partners. We've started flyering. We've had a couple of people that are interested, but we don't have anyone that's like signed on the dotted line, I want to come in for an assessment yet.
Shauna?
My question is, I know that we have some other agencies that are working on some similar placements, OER and reuse. What makes what you're offering different and better?
We consider all those agencies our partners and referral partners for us. What makes us different is that we're not just a job training program. Our job training program is designed and developed and guided by the employers themselves. We spent hours and hours on the manufacturing floors, meeting with the HR departments, meeting with all the operations managers, the floor managers at several manufacturers. We went and found, training modules. We vetted them with the employers and vetted all of the skill sets that they need. So we know when we're doing the assessments to identify skills and skills gaps that they're going to come into our program, they're going to learn the skills that they need, they're going to go visit all of the employers. They have one-on-one time with the employers. The last cohort, when they went up to Therm, Bob Sproul, fourth generation owner of this company, spent an hour and a half with these participants, talked to them from beginning to end about his company and what makes people successful. You saw people in this program excited for the first time in their work lives about what they might be able to do. That's what makes us different. So we guarantee an interview. We match the employee, the prospective employees with the manufacturer where we know they'll be successful. If you've got someone that really likes to work by themselves, they're not going to do very well in manufacturer A, where it's a very collaborative environment. But they might do very well at Precision Filters, where it's, very individualized work, is just sort of an example. There are lots of training programs out there, but they're not tied directly to employers, and they're not guided by employers. So you have, programs that might be teaching wonderful soft skills, but yep, you've got the soft skills, let me help you with your resume, and the buck sort of stops there. So what we're trying to do is bring all of those partners in. We know that Finger Lakes Reuse does a great job at X, Y, and A. So can we fill in the blanks and make sure that someone can not only get some of those soft skills or some of those trainings at Reuse, but can we pipeline them in somewhere into this pathway? And again, not everyone has to go from orientation all the way to placement. If they're already prepared, we have the relationships with the employers and we can assist with the placement piece.
Thank you. Randy?
Yes, you mentioned that your current funding model is 3 different entities primarily funding your budget. Is this OTR only for the county, or is anybody else going to chip in for this? Or?
So what we did is we set an ambitious 5-year work plan that was shared with the county, and we identified that we needed another staff person to grow this program the way that we needed to adequately. So we know what we have estimated what our 5-year budget will be. We asked all of our investors to come in at 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. So the county chose to come in at about 24.5%, 25%. So we're trying to make up that difference. And at the end of the day, if we don't make up the difference, we're on track with our investor campaign. Our goal is to raise 1/3 of our budget. We're about 65% of the way there. We're pretty confident we're going to hit that. The gap really is the IDA and the Local Development Corporation. So they'll come in at a third of our budget. If we don't fill the rest of the gap from the county, we'll need to look for other ways to fill it, or we won't grow the program as quickly as we would like to. We know there's demand, we know there's need. So, your funding is going to go a long way to ramp up the recruitment piece and the barriers mitigation piece.
Sort of further to that conversation, and I see that Mike Lane and Rich both have their hands up, but I wanted to pursue this because you presented a 5-year plan for the number of people that you wanted to serve. And don't get me wrong, because I think this is one of the best programs IAED's ever done. I think Danielle's model for this was just genius. And if you want to know what makes this special, it's the direct-to-work piece. You're working with employers, so there's a direct pathway to a job for the people that you train. That's all great. But you have a 5-year plan. You're asking us for $75,000 for this year. Does that mean you're going to come back for the next 4 years and ask for another $75,000, or is there some mechanism for the employers who are also benefiting from this to chip in?
That's our plan, Deborah.
Okay.
There's several models for getting employers into these pathways, and we've looked at them. We've seen what works and what doesn't work. We wanted them to be completely bought in to the benefits of this program before we started asking them to fund it. I mean, this is really sort of proof of concept.
Okay. Well, yeah, I hope so. Okay, I've got Mike Lane, Rich, and Greg.
Hi, Heather. Couple of questions. I don't think we talk enough here at the legislature about economic development, so I'm pleased to have you here. It is Tompkins County economic development, not just Ithaca. The question I was wondering, with Micron and Menlo, are you getting inquiries along those same lines now from other potential employers that might be interested in our area?
We are not only semiconductor, but supply chain. Our biggest impediment, everyone has workforce impediments, but our biggest impediment is we don't have sites, we don't have buildings, we don't have infrastructure. I mean, those are the 3 big ones. We landed Menlo Micro into an existing fabrication facility that considerably reduced their cost of coming here. They would have had to spend almost 3 times the amount if they were going to fit out a vacant building. The fact that equipment and the clean room was already in place. So, those are some of the things that are in our plan to sort of work on. The site selectors have said over the past couple of years, the number one thing you need to do is provide sites. If you don't have sites that are fully infrastructured, you're not even making the first cut.
I totally agree, and we've talked about that for at least 10 years. Is there a plan to make a recommendation to the county about how we could help, maybe through the IDA or otherwise, to do some infrastructure improvements?
Well, the IDA has a little bit of a fund balance, and I have made some recommendations that's where I think that funding should go, to identifying the next place where we can start buying land, bringing in infrastructure so that we can be ready to land the companies that are coming as a result of the Micron announcement. That's where I think that we need to place some of our efforts. And as I'm putting together the details for my work plan and my team for next year, that's going to be one of our priority items, identifying how we can start to develop those shovel-ready sites, and who we can partner with to invest in some of that and that infrastructure.
And one more, if I just might. when you're talking to these people, is the fact that we have an airport, is that important?
It's absolutely important. I say we're centrally located, and we are, but we're also centrally isolated. I get RFPs from the state on a pretty regular basis. I respond when I meet their minimum criteria, but that's usually not very often. One of the minimum criteria is going to be access to a major rail hub, a highway within 5 to 7 miles, or an airport. So the airport checks the box. We don't have the other two. For a lot of our startup companies, they're reliant on venture capital from California, from Boston, from New York City, from DC, and from North Carolina even. They need to go and travel. They need to bring their investors into town. And it's a little bit off-putting to say, well, you can fly into the airport an hour away and I'll pick you up at midnight. Not that our airport an hour away isn't sufficient, but it's really nice. It is an absolute must-have in terms of economic development to have an airport, not only for people, but for the customs facility. We had a couple of users. It wasn't really being marketed, I know, but the couple of users that were using it, it was tremendously beneficial for them. So, they're going to find other routes at this point, I think. Yes, the airport is tremendously important. It was part of the discussion when the county was deciding about expanding the airport. It's sort of our little crown jewel in terms of transportation.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, Rich and then Greg.
Thanks, Deborah. Just clarification, you talked about your OTR in conjunction with URO and OAR and Finger Lakes Reuse. Danielle, you've been attending the Career Pathways meetings, and I appreciate the time you've put in there. Are you considering this an extension of the Career Pathways model where you're trying to get the different not-for-profit agencies to work together, or are you trying to build something different?
So I wouldn't say that this is different. This is targeting a different industry, which is not competitive to Aloja's initiative around green jobs, where he's really working on the new Green Deal for Ithaca, the electrifying and the weatherization positions. This is an opportunity to continue to build out the workforce ecosystem. As Heather expressed, OAR has been a wonderful referral partner, and we've actually taken several of their clients. And we have been working with Diane as well to learn a little bit more of the individuals that are going to reuse through their job readiness program. What we're learning is that they're at a lower skill set, especially around their math skills. So larger conversations will happen around how can we create a better remediation plan or a lily pad process for individuals that want to exit out of reuse, that are interested in moving forward in some type of manufacturing position with these 8 manufacturers. So right now, how we are engaging with reuse and our OAR is really around recruitment and referrals. But this is not something that's being built out in competition or competitiveness. It is kind of a parallel effort to serve job seekers. One of the things that we're all realizing is we're all struggling around recruitment. So in those conversations, we have tried to figure out better ways to do systems change in the community, where that if we are in front of certain community partners, if they're not a good fit for manufacturing, how can we refer them to CCE's Green Jobs initiative, and so on and so forth.
Are you good, Rich?
Yeah, I think maybe we should have some conversation offline. That would be great. Thanks.
Okay, Greg says he passes. All right, is there anybody, Veronica and then Annie?
Briefly, one, love the non-binary representation and the demographics. Two, could you just re-clarify what exactly the $75,000 would be going to, or what's the difference with and without? Like you mentioned hiring a staff person, so is this like the cost of one new staff person, and how many staff people do you have? Is it just Danny, or
We have,
What?
there's 5 of us at IAED.
I mean, on working
Danny-
on this program?
Danny is dedicated to the Direct to Work program, and we all sort of pitch in different areas when needed. This does not cover 100% of a new staff person with Fringe and all of that, but it was the number that I felt filled the gap in order for us to add that staff person. And they will be dedicated to workforce.
Thank you.
Annie?
Thanks, Heather, for mentioning too about living wage jobs. You didn't, I don't think you used that term, but if you're over, I think it's 16.661, per hour, then, it's living wage jobs. So, and it sounds like some people are way above that, and helping them get off safety nets. So I just had a couple questions here regarding, or maybe it's one, just looking at the numbers here for the current program. It's, you have, initially, there were 8 people that were direct referred to the employers,
Yes.
and so they were people that didn't go through the program, but just through the assessment, you saw that they were ready to be referred right to program.
Yes, so there were referral partners, like the Department of Social Services, that said, I have this client that's unemployed, that's looking for work. I think they'd be a good candidate. They referred them over. We talked to them. We did the assessment. They clearly had the skills that we could confidently match them with employer interviews.
And so then, for the 11 people who graduated, did they all get interviews?
They all got interviews. They've all been placed in employment. We did just finish the summer cohort. I think we might have one that just interviewed and is waiting for an offer, but we've done 3 cohorts now, and they've all been placed in employment.
Okay. So I'm just looking at the bottom numbers where it says job placement, 16 referred to employers. So I was just thinking that you have the 11 that graduated plus the 8 direct referrals, which would be 19, not 16? I'm just trying to look at like stats and stuff
Yes,
like
I'm trying to understand the math, which I don't do in my head. Danny?
I can answer that. Some of the direct referrals were not hired as of yet. As you know, we built this out in partnership with Alliance for Manufacturing and Technology. Some of those individuals that were referred to direct employment came through Job Corps and were interested in to relocate here into Tompkins. So they had bypassed the direct to work program, but they had also received the Certified Manufacturing Associate certificate through Job Corps, which, talking to them more in length, they were interested in actually interviewing with firm. So we are currently in the process of doing a direct referral for them. They have not been officially placed yet in jobs. So that's why the number up there is that, yes, they bypassed the program, but they will be a direct referral to employment. What we are working now on is the housing situation, that if they are going to relocate here, that they do have housing in place and other supportive services so they can start employment. So this is an ongoing process that we're working with BIRM as well as AMT.
Okay, thank you. And then this was a 4-week program, right?
Correct.
And do you anticipate, now that you've got the program set up in the pipeline, will you be able to have more than one? This is, or how many sessions a year, I guess?
Currently, the employers have committed to 3 cohorts a year, spring, summer, and fall. And in December, I will be meeting one-on-one with all the manufacturers to kind of talk about hiring trends for 2024. They're the ones that are really in the driver's seat to depend on how many programs we'll do annually. But right now, we are going to consider 3, but that may change in December depending on the feedback we get from the manufacturers.
Okay, thank you. And this is helpful. I know you've talked, both of you have talked about this program before, but this is really helpful in looking at, the next program of how this was, the successes of that and the future of it. So thank you for answering those questions.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Heather. Thank you, Danielle. Always nice to see you. And we will move on now to the Department of Emergency Response. That's on page 4-66 of your book. And let's see. Hi, Michael. How are you?
Doing well. How are you this evening?
Oh, pretty good so far, but it's early.
Understood. Thank you. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here this evening. Joining me are my colleagues, Jessica Burfus, our Deputy Director, and Joe Milliman, our EMS Program Manager. We have two OTRs that we're seeking support for. The first is for contracts as far as service agreements. So we have currently 23 service agreements with various vendors, and due to contractual increases, we're seeking to get support for $26,208 to help support those adjustments. And then the second OTR that we're seeking support for is for our EMS Rapid Medical Response Program. We will be presenting on October 3rd to the full legislature our EMS program. So if I don't have an answer tonight to a question maybe related to that particular OTR, I will make sure we have it on the 3rd when Joe and I will be presenting, and we'll be in person at the legislative chambers for that presentation. Would you like an overview of a high-level overview of the EMS program?
Yeah, I think that we can figure out what the maintenance of effort OTR is for, but I think probably we would benefit from more detail on the EMS Rapid Medical Response. Absolutely.
And as I mentioned, we will have a more comprehensive presentation for the next meeting. So the Rapid Medical Response Program is designed to help supplement the community-based EMS and fire services that are struggling at the moment by the challenge of having rapid medical response for the majority of their EMS calls. What I mean by that is our fire services in most instances offer a service called rescue. And rescue is when they send an EMT in advance of a transport ambulance to assist a person experiencing a medical emergency and wait with them until the transport agency arrives. In our research, we have found that, and there's about 42% of those calls go unanswered currently, meaning that when someone calls 911 as they're waiting a transport ambulance to arrive, the local rescue agency that would be responsible to be their first responder isn't able to respond. So this plan would be to have 3 EMT or basic life support units strategically placed around the county that could help fill that gap, so that when there's a call that comes in for 911 for a medical emergency, that we're able to send that unit if the local agency isn't able to respond, to begin treating them as they await the transport ambulance.
All right, thank you. So this is what we have been erroneously referring to as the Fly Car Initiative, is that right?
That's right.
Okay.
We decided to rebrand it Rapid Medical Response because typically the term Fly Car is used when a paramedic is in the first response vehicle, and since we'll be using EMTs, we didn't really want to cause confusion in the community. So that's why we rebranded it Rapid Medical Response.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to be sure we were talking about the same thing. Thank you.
Yes, we are. Yes, fair question. Yes.
Okay, does anyone have any questions for Michael? Randy?
Yes, hi, Michael. I was speaking to chiefs and other people at the Enfield Fire Department. And of course, there's a challenge of getting volunteers to come in and do those things and get the training. And they were saying that they have to send their people that do volunteer, they can go out for 200 hours of training in 1 year just to get their certification. And so the biggest roadblock for them is that people have to take vacations or their own time to do that. and they lose half their people right off the bat because they realize, wait a minute, I got to do 4 weeks of training to become an EMT, and there's another lesser training, maybe it's 140 hours for something else. Anything being discussed on how to support the local fire departments with that?
Yes, that's a great question. And the answer is yes. This was actually something that Rich has really emphasized to us through the Public Safety Committee. So I'm very pleased to tell you that Joe Millman, working in partnership with CMC, has been able to bring an EMT basic course into the county. That started a few weeks ago. We had 12 people sign up for it, and that's in the evening. So I think in the example that you were given by Enfield, there is a program that runs full-time during the day, and that would have previously required people, as you mentioned, to take vacation time. But this program that Joe has worked on with CMC will allow them to do it in the evening. And we're really pleased with the number of students that signed up for this class, and we're already starting to design next year's program because there's still a very strong interest. So this will definitely help support the community-based services with regards to recruiting, and then also with providing education that's easier for individuals that are working during the day. So we're really excited about it, and it's been very successful so far.
Well, does that cost the participants anything?
Joe, can you answer that?
Yeah, so there is an upfront cost to that that's payable to SUNY Medical Upstate Hospital. Basically, they're the ones that are in charge of the program. At the end of the class, the home agency is able to submit to the Bureau of EMS to be reimbursed for that cost. So some agencies elect to pay for the student up front. Some agencies make the student pay them their own way. But at the end, there is reimbursement for it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Joe.
I've got Rich John and Mike Lane.
Thanks, Deborah. Actually, I was wondering if Lisa could just provide a little bit of context here on this OTR, because we're seeking a grant, and if we're successful in getting actually 2 grants, I believe, we would not need to put this money into our budget or spend the money, but we don't know. We won't know if we're successful until after we have to make a decision here. But the timing is such that if we want this in 2024, we need to act now, and we need to also continue with discussions with the other municipalities. But Lisa, maybe you could just.
Sure, I'd be glad to. Thanks, Rich.
Thanks.
Again, coming from the recommendations of the TCOG Working Group, Public Safety Committee, and formulating this plan, we realized there was a window of timing for which we could apply for 2 state grants to support it, and of course they don't line up nicely with our budget process. The first was a local government efficiency grant, which we have applied for to cover the cost of the vehicles for this program. We submitted that grant application, and we may know the outcome of that later on this fall. Secondly, we're preparing the countywide shared services grant application to be submitted in a couple of months' time. There's public hearings happening now throughout this month, and one happening with the legislature. And that would fully cover the costs of year 1 of the program. So if both of those grants are funded, there would be no cost for year 1. If only one, or if neither of the grants are funded, then we would be responsible for the cost for year 1. And we are working together with the Department of Emergency Response on some options for consideration or recommendation for cost-sharing arrangements with the municipalities that would be impacted by this program. So, because either way, we know that we would, in year two, there are going to need to be costs that are covered for this program.
So the cost in subsequent years would be primarily the staffing?
That's correct.
All right, and when you said that the first grant that we've already applied for would cover the cost of the cars, is that the $165,000?
Remember the exact cost of that, what we've applied for that?
It's termed automotive supplies, so.
Probably. That's
Okay.
about right.
All right, thank you. Okay, anything else, Rich? Apparently not. Okay, Mike.
So I assume the reason it's one time is because of this grant situation that you just talked to us about. Of course, cars wear out and we'll have to replace them in the future. My only, I like this program. I think we need to do it. But I'm worried that if we say, yeah, we're going to spend $600,000 no matter what, the other municipalities that need it are going to say, well, if the county's going to do it, why should we do much? And so I think there's a risk there. We may have to take that risk, but I think it's real important that word get out to the municipalities that we aren't going to do it alone. And I think that the legislators who have municipalities that are going to be affected by this really need to get that word out to their constituents about that. That's my feeling. And then one minor question. Michael, why aren't we going to have paramedics?
The process of having paramedics is far more complex, and what we were looking to do was to address the gap that the community-based services currently exist, and the service that they're providing is at the basic life support level. So in working with our community partners, primarily the fire chiefs, we thought that since that's where they're having their biggest struggle, then that's where we could provide the most assistance, and it's more cost effective than doing an ALS or paramedic program.
Are we eventually going to have to move to paramedics?
I think there's a possibility. Something that we've learned in our research and speaking with other counties that are looking at it, to date, we know of at least 12 other counties that are either doing something now or are looking at doing something. And many of them have started off the way we're starting off and have had to evolve and either move to ALS fly cars or even full ambulance service. We don't know necessarily that that's a direction that we'll have to move in. But most certainly, I think that that is something that if we have to move in that direction, that this will provide a really solid foundation in order for us to do it.
Thank you.
Rich, is that an old hand or a new hand?
A new hand. And I just wanted to say, Mike, I agree that with Mike Lane's comments, this has to be a partnership. And even if we're showing a number here that is the cost of the whole program, we need to proceed with an understanding that there'd be a cost-sharing mechanism reached with all the municipalities for the whole thing to be viable. And you have to protect the ambulance services that are already operating. So anyway, there's a lot to do here, but
Yeah, working out the cost structure is going to be a bit complicated, but that's why we get paid the big bucks. Lisa?
To that point, I know that Mike and his team are working on a presentation for the legislature at the first meeting in October, and we at County Admin have been in discussion with him about that, and we expect in that presentation to have some potential cost-sharing scenarios for consideration.
That'll be great, thank you. Randy?
Yeah, on that. So what happens if a municipality says, we're not interested and we don't want to be part of this? I've heard that from a few, so I'm just curious how that works. So then they don't get the coverage, right? So anyway, that answer would be helpful for me when we get to that point. I heard that people were kind of wishy-washy about it. I don't know why. One of the things that was brought up to me again is one of the fire chiefs said if we could pay stipends to people, you wouldn't have to hire people. So if they got paid $10,000, they could have more EMTs on staff. So that's how they look at it. Just wanted to share that. So.
And if I may, that's not something that was shared with us, Randy, just so you know, but we did receive unanimous support from the Fire Chiefs Association. So maybe that is something that could be explored, but that's not something that's been brought up to our team when we brought it up at the Fire Chiefs Association, just so you're aware.
Okay, I see a hand up. I don't know your name. Jessica. Yeah.
The issue with paying a stipend to firefighters specifically, EMTs might be a little bit different, but if they're a member of a fire company, the issue with paying the stipend is then they are no longer a volunteer and they would no longer qualify for volunteer firefighter benefits should something happen to them. So there's a little bit of a workforce issue in that respect. That was the issue with paying a stipend.
Thank you. That's valuable clarification. Okay, if y'all don't mind, I think we're going to move along. We're well behind schedule. Thank you, Michael. Thank you to your staff, and we'll look forward to hearing more from you next Tuesday.
Thank you.
I'm sorry?
Thank you.
They just had a maintenance of effort OTR. That's okay. All right. So next up is the Office of Human Rights. Dr. Clark, I see you. We'll get to it.
Yes, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. That's on page 4-94 of your books.
Okay. I wanted to talk about the OTR that our office has requested for 2023. Do I need to share my screen with you?
Unless you've arranged for Lisa or Norma to do it, yes, you do.
Okay. Okay. Let's see. Okay. Okay. I'm going to put this on page 1. Okay. So this year's OTR is part of a two-part request. The first part of this request is for, excuse me, is for $20,000 targeted for OHR education and outreach programs. It will support program offerings to address significant human rights issues. This funding, as has been the case the last 2 years, has enabled us to provide honoraria from local, regional, state, and national speakers and panelists. It's also used for publicity. And a portion of these funds will cover the cost and honoraria for our annual County City Juneteenth commemoration, which I chair. This year we utilized these funds to provide a pretty broad range of programming this year, from the King holiday event to Black History Month, Women's History Month, excuse me, Earth Day, Asian Pacific Islander Heritage Month, Pride Month, a program on aging and human rights, and Democracy Fest, which I will discuss in a little bit more detail in a minute. We are planning programs for the remainder of the year that will focus on homelessness and marginalized communities, and as well as veterans and human rights, and a program which we will commemorate the 75th anniversary of the adoption of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights by the UN General Assembly 75 years ago in 1948. This year, we also utilized funds to support a Democracy Fest event at Southside Community Center. It was held last month on August 6th and was sponsored by Your Vote and Your Voice and Your Vote, which is a civic engagement coalition that has been facilitated by OHR and the Human Rights Commission. We utilize these funds to cover costs for this Democracy Day event, and which included staging and promotional materials, paying for sound equipment, as well as honoraria for a DJ. This event went very well for us, and we are now in the stages of planning for next year's event as well. Excuse me. And so the second part, now actually I will, and there's an additional matter I will add to this after I've discussed this, second part of our OTR proposal. And this would be for support of the Human Rights Commission. This would designate $3,000 for the work of our advisory group. They would cover these expenses as are listed right now. They would, one of them is, as stated, is an annual reception for partner agencies and organizations. We are, in fact, having such a reception, the first such reception of this type, on October the 4th, next Wednesday, at the public library, in order to provide an opportunity to engage and network with partner agencies with whom we have worked, or with whom we could potentially work. We also want to do that, have these monies set aside for this upcoming year. There is also listed an end-of-year human rights reception and recognition, which would recognize persons in our community who have been stalwarts for human rights over years, over a number of years. And the remainder of this involves helping to support community conversations that the Commission will hold, in which they will engage issues such as disparities in women's health, employment-related abuse and profiling, immigrant experiences, housing, rural poverty, and marginalization. And the second, and there will also be a fundraising event in the effort to provide resources for the Commission. And there are also just some other expenses that are listed and are pretty self-explanatory that will help with outreach, particularly with the outreach that the Education and Outreach Committee does, which helps to augment the work that our office does. And these costs are listed here. Thirdly, and I apologize for not including this in the report, we also, we are aware that we have not been able to fill at present our education and outreach position, which is a 20-hour position. It had originally been a 40-hour position. But we have not been able to fulfill that, and it is on hold at the moment. But we do want to make sure that the funding will be in place to be able to conduct the search for that person. If budgetary constraints permit it to be so, but we do want to keep that funding in place until the time comes when we might be able to conduct that search and be able to identify a successful candidate for this position. So those are my comments, and I would welcome your questions.
Does anyone have any questions for Ken? Randy?
Actually, maybe a question for Norma. Is this recommended? And I'm online, so I got a current thing here. So
Yes.
It says recommended one time, it's not. But then down below, it says recommended one-time funding.
Yeah, I'm confused too, because the $20,000 appears to be recommended, but then there's a $23,000 total, which I don't know what the deal is.
In the version that I'm looking at, it's recommended.
The entire 23?
Yes.
Okay.
The position that apparently is broke. There is a position that was removed from the Human Rights Commission's budget, and that's more what he's looking for, I think, this evening, because this has been approved multi-year.
Okay.
Yeah, I couldn't figure that out. Is he asking for something that's not in here, position-wise?
So
You're asking if, I'm sorry.
to clarify, there was a .5 FTE education and outreach coordinator in the Office of Human Rights that was vacant and reduced during the soft hiring freeze.
Oh. All right. Got it. Okay, thank you. Anything else? Veronica?
Yeah, sorry, maybe this is not for now, but I still don't understand the numbers on the online budget. I'm looking at the overall human rights operating budget. In particular, the target for fiscal year 2024 has, like, the first 4 lines have some numbers for salary and wages, overtime, which is 0, premium pay and fringe. And then there's nothing in the next 2 columns, and then the total recommended budget, it's different numbers. And I don't know what to make of that, but I'd like to. Or like what positions are included in what.
Not included in the.
Paper, different online.
So which ones are the real ones?
You pick.
Well, that'll make budgeting easier.
Oh, would that it were true.
We're going to need a couple minutes, I'm afraid.
Should we move forward with the county historian while y'all figure this out?
Can I ask a different question in the meantime that's not about the numbers, I guess?
Sure.
Dr. Clark, I might have misheard, but it sounded like you, the vacant half-time position, you said you weren't prepared at this time to conduct a search for, but are hoping to later in the year?
Well, yes, I mean, that's dependent upon just what the budgetary situation is overall. I mean, there's, as Lisa mentioned, soft freeze on the position. And so I would like to be able, when at the appropriate time, whenever that is, whether it's in, this fiscal year or the following or whenever. But just want to ensure that those funds are in place for when the time is appropriate.
Okay. I guess I'm wondering how you're going to manage to use I know it's a continuation of an OTR, but the funds for more education and outreach without an education and outreach coordinator. Or is it more that the fund requests are for the hopeful scenario where you do hire someone quickly?
Well, right now, I mean, what that person will be doing is basically assisting me in the organizing and planning of programming, and will also too be responsible for outreach. And that outreach will be, as stated earlier, augmented by the work of the commission as well. So, right now, I mean, I'm the one that's doing the implementation and the planning for these programs. I, would be, assisted in doing so, working with a new person who would fill this position at a 20-hour position.
How long has that position been unoccupied?
Actually, it has been unoccupied since 2019. The pandemic certainly played a role in this, stalling of this position, and then we began we began a search this year, and the position had to be basically reorganized, and the position was redrafted. We basically rewrote the position and fashioned it for a 20-hour post. And we had to end that search, though, that we launched this summer for that position because of the soft freeze.
Okay, thank you. Greg, you have a question, and then Annie.
Yes. So any position, this is for Lisa or Norma, any position that is included in the soft hiring freeze, the budgeted amount is in their target budget, correct? Or it's been removed from their target budget?
Yes.
Okay, so their target budget has been removed by that position. It's not like a placeholder or anything. Okay, so it will continue to be a hard hiring freeze through the next fiscal budget, if not approved.
Unless we add it back in.
Unless we add it back in at some other time or change the target. Okay. And then this is more of a process question and not necessarily relating to this. Just curious, I'm trying to make sense of the recommendations from the administration budget and so forth. So this OTR was recommended, but if we go back to the emergency response, the software that continues with their maintenance of effort was not recommended.
Correct. I was unable to recommend any ongoing target increases and meet the 2% target goal. So that this was a one-time request, theirs was a target request.
Okay. If we would have phrased our ask to you differently in the future, would you, I guess it seems like it's hard to weigh what administration would really like to see because of the 2% that we provided you.
I think we're going to get to that.
Yeah.
If not later this evening, but certainly in upcoming meetings. So if in the interest of moving along, because we're already well behind and far from crisp, can we?
It doesn't make sense to me.
I understand your dilemma. Okay, Annie, please be crisp.
Thank you. Dr. Clark, so adding or hiring the education and outreach coordinator, can you please just briefly say what type of things that person taking over some of your duties would free you up to be able to do?
Well, they would be able, I think, as they help me with the planning of our programming, that person would be able to do some of the follow-up just logistical follow-up, whether it is with, with speakers, as well as, say, for instance, in the event that which we will in the future, a return to in-person programming, be able to take care of the logistics in terms of securing a venue, determining what sound and other pieces need to be in place. They would help in particular in terms of outreach to the community and working in concert with the Human Rights Commission in terms of education and outreach. They would be able to, excuse me, to do those things, and in particular, I think especially with outreach, things that some things that I'm currently doing, which would then enable me to be able to take care of other administrative tasks, but also to, have some latitude in terms of being able to not have the entirety of the load of the programming on me, although I will guide that programming and work in concert with this person.
Right, just to clarify, my question was specifically, are there things that it sounds like adding this person back in or hiring this position you'd be able to do more with the programs you're already doing, enhance them. But in particular, are there things that you could be doing that you're not able to do that this would free you up to do?
Well, I think that, I think it would enable me to I think, address, as we've increasingly, we've begun to see, the number of persons who are contacting us for complaints. It would give me latitude to be able to address their concerns, I think, a little bit more efficiently. That is to say, it would enable me to address those concerns. I would be able to get back to that person that same day. Sometimes because of the nature of my schedule and other demands related to the job, sometimes I have to delay, getting back to a person maybe the next day or so. So that, I think it would enable me to, that's one of the things that it would enable me to do and give me a little bit more latitude.
Okay, thank you.
Could I just get a point of information? The OTR there is no OTR about a halftime FTE?
No.
It was under the reductions, the county administrator reductions due to the soft hiring freeze.
Okay, but
it's not an OTR for this department, so I think we're just going to move on because we are already so soggy.
we're actually on schedule if you look at the time.
Are we really? Gosh, it doesn't feel that way.
Yeah. I actually had been originally scheduled for 6 o'clock.
Oh, okay. Interesting. All right, well, thank you. Are there any more questions for Dr. Ken? Thank you, Ken. Have a pleasant evening.
You're welcome. Thank you. All of you do the same.
Okay, so now apparently we are going to hear from the county historian, and that material is on page 4-48 of your book. And thank God Katrina's here to keep me on the straight and narrow.
Except for I don't see the OTR.
And so is that Ms. Johnson Kelly. You're muted, Ms. Johnson Kelly.
Oh, yeah, I read about this the other day, so why isn't it on here? Next year, this is all just going to flow perfectly.
You're still on mute.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank goodness.
Okay. Sorry about that. I lost the Zoom screen when I went to share my screen, so I apologize for that.
The tech gets us every time.
Yeah, and now I've lost my PowerPoint, so. Oh,
Well, we can see it.
well, return to meeting. Let's see if that'll do it. Okay. Okay. Wait a minute. Okay. I really want to express my appreciation for being allowed to present to you tonight. I have a much smaller request than the other agencies, and okay. All right, I'll share it this way. The over-target request that I have proposed is an additional $3,500 be added to the Historical Commission budget. The Historical Commission was founded in 2018, and one of its primary roles has been to publish a series of booklets. 7 have been published in the last 5 years. Each one costs a little over $4,000. I'm proposing increasing the current $5,000 annual budget to $8,500, which would fund 2 of these publications a year. The current allocation will fund a little bit more than the publication, but it's not enough to do 2. And, you know, these publications have been very well received. They've been very diverse. They've hit a variety of audiences. They've included, the recent publications have been Black Voices. There was one on the Guy Okono. We've had publications called Explaining Tompkins, Living in Tompkins, Permanent Residents, Those Who Are Buried Here, Political Tompkins, and Immigration and Ethnicity in Tompkins County. So it's, you know, the publication series has been a really important way of getting history out to the common people. Some people will only read things on the internet. Some people still prefer the printed word, and these are made available to various of our partners, such as the History Center in Tompkins, Ithaca, and they then sell them to people who come into their venues, and they've been a very successful part of Tompkins County history, and I'm hoping that we can continue the program and in fact expand it a little bit and keep up the rate of publication that was going on under Carol Campbell. And I'd also like to say that Vice Chair of the Historical Commission, Joe Mariana, is with us today via Zoom, so that if people have questions about the history of this program, they can be addressed by somebody who was actually involved with it at the time. So does anyone have any questions?
Questions? Mike Lane.
Hello, Laura.
Hello, Mike.
Could you perhaps tell the legislature what the publications our society is, or commission rather, is considering?
There's one in progress right now that's being authored by Mary Tomlin, the former historian for the city of Ithaca, on William H. Miller. Most people are familiar with him. He was a very familiar architect. The William Henry Miller Inn is located just a block off the edge of the Commons, and it's sort of one of the real landmarks downtown. That publication will cost upwards of $5,500. We've gotten a contribution from Cornell University to cover the extra amount over the $4,000 that was originally budgeted for it. And this is a model that we might be able to use in the future if we want to fund publications that have more photographs. That one is coming in over budget because it will be very visually interesting. Other publications that are currently being considered or are in process, municipal historians of Tompkins County are working on a project looking at the 1918 flu pandemic in conjunction with responses to the recently passed, and as I know from my experience the last 2 weeks, still ongoing COVID pandemic. We also have a Barnes of Tompkins County book, possibly illustrated by the Town of Danby historian Mary Ann Barr, that's potentially in the works, and a book on lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, queer sites and history in Tompkins County. And various other sorts of things have been proposed, such as doing podcasts and oral histories. So we may not confine ourselves strictly to publishing booklets, but there are other activities the Historical Commission would like to undertake.
Thanks. And I wondered if you might mention the fact that we're only 2 years away from the United States, I think they're calling it the semi-quincentennial.
Yes, the semi-quincentennial.
250th anniversary of our independence.
I think it will become a word that will be more familiar to all of us. And for those of us who remember the bicentennial and all the big hoopla that was associated with it, I suspect the tone will be very different for the semi-quincentennial. There is a group that is has been organized among the historians in central New York, and Carol Kemen had founded it. It is now ongoing, and Michael Oberg from SUNY Geneseo is sort of taking point on some of the activities with that. But the county historians from all the central New York counties who were affected by the Sullivan-Clinton campaign, which, as you know, it took place in 1779 and is what basically really reduced the presence of the Gayacono or Cayuga locally, and the Haudenosaunee or Iroquois sort of statewide, reduced the populations such that, you know, after the Revolutionary War, George Washington was able to pay off his soldiers with land grants. And that, of course, is what created this county as we now know it, as settlers moved in and took up those grants or sold them to others who then bought the land and moved here. It's going to be an interesting time, and it's going to be sort of an important time to pay attention to history and educate people that, about a chapter of history that was often overlooked in the history books, at least the ones that, I was taught with in school. We are also recruiting new members for the Historical Commission, as some are cycling off and others have resigned due to time conflicts. And one of the new proposed members is a middle school social studies teacher who is tasked with teaching these various things. And I think it's really important to communicate with the schools and really open up broad avenues of communication more generally within the community.
Thank you.
Incidentally, for those who are interested, this year is the United States Pluto return. Just, it's the United States Pluto return. No astrologies?
Yeah, we've been around, Pluto's been around once.
Yeah, it's a big deal. Anyhow.
Does that make it a planet again?
No.
As far as astrology is concerned, it was always a planet. Anyway, any other questions for Ms. Johnson-Kelly? Annie.
Thank you. I see in your the description of your OTR requests, it also mentions you're requesting a modest $200 budget. I'm using your words purposely because $200 to get office supplies to outfit your office it is pretty modest. So is that factored in because into the 3,500, or where is that?
No, that was a separate request, and I'm not sure what the status of that is and whether that's something I should be detailing tonight. The county historian's office was not used by the previous county historian. It is located physically adjacent to the exhibit hall in the History Center in Tompkins County, right on the Commons, and it had a little bit of furniture in there, but most of that had been purchased by Carol Kemen, and I'm trying to get it outfitted, and I've been using it, and I don't need a whole lot in there, but just a few things here and there, printer, toner, and that kind of thing. So
where is that in the budget?
I wasn't aware that that was an additional request to this.
Lisa, could you respond?
Yes, I was not aware that that was in addition to the 3,500. County administration,
Open-
overall, we have been outfitting out of our budget, the county historian's office so far, so.
So will that continue?
Yes.
So if Ms. Johnson Kelly needs anything, she should just ask you. Thank you.
If she needs anything.
Thank you.
Almost anything.
Almost anything. Not a Tesla. Okay. Be warned, Ms. Johnson Kelly, no Teslas.
I won't ask for a Tesla. Thank you for the warning.
Okay. Any other questions for the county historian? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, so moving on to probation.
Oh.
How timely. Huh?
So,
Crisp after all, Greg.
well, Dan is coming in and settling himself. I think that we, Norma, I should say, corrected the glitch in the Office of Human Rights budget. So I don't know if you want to speak to that.
It was right, and then it wasn't. I have an email into the software vendor because I'm not sure what happened there. But yeah, it's been corrected.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that was fast, Dan. You're a whiz.
I apologize if we held you up.
You did not.
They just announced your department.
As
and
you were
walked
walking
in the
in.
door. So it was
Wonderful.
good timing.
Thank you for having us here tonight. We do have a small slideshow. Third party.
Dan, can you speak closer to the mic?
Absolutely, I apologize. So we're here because we have one over-target request asking you to consider restoring a probation officer title that we were expecting to be in our 2024 budget, but had been vacant at the time that things were reviewed. I wanted to clarify that that position was not vacant because we did not need it. It was vacant because in early 2023, we had reclassified a probation officer title to a senior probation officer title to accommodate the growth in the Ithaca Wellness and Recovery Court, which had become the basic equivalent of any of our drug court programs as far as numbers. So it really called for a senior probation officer position, but all of our other senior probation officers were tied up with specialized caseloads. We met with county administration and was approved for that as part of the considerations for that reclassification. We agreed to not fill the probation officer title until at least halfway through 2023 in order to remain budget neutral and not have to come to you to ask for additional funding, because the salary and fringe for a senior probation officer is higher than that of a probation officer title. That is the reason that the position was vacant. In June, the probation officer exam was offered. We were waiting for that list to hopefully be able to hire from, because we did not have an active civil service list at the time. And then in meeting with county administrator, we were informed that due to fiscal constraints, we were looking at that position for removal from the 2024 budget. I strongly believe that we need to retain that position. We've been okay for the last few years. We started out 2020 with a department of 36 individuals. In 2021 budget, we were asked to make an 11% budget cut, which we did. In doing so, we lost 2 probation officer titles, one that was filled and one that was vacant, in anticipation of being needed for Raise the Age. That vacant one did not hurt us, but the position that, because Raise the Age numbers didn't justify the need for it. So at that time, it was fine. But because we lost the probation officer title that was filled, we had to redistribute that caseload amongst the existing staff, as we were also dealing with COVID shutdowns and 50% in the office at any given time to support social distancing and those things. I have a couple of slides I could show to sort of show the trends in criminal court supervision levels. So the blue line that starts out the highest at 550 was the number of criminal court supervision cases we started with in January of 2020. As you can see, throughout COVID, those numbers continue to go down month to month. Then the black line is where we started in 2021, and again, the supervision numbers continued to go down. So with the reduced staff, we were able to accommodate the clientele that we had. And then in 2022, again, the numbers start out lower, but they start to creep up on the green line. And now we're in 2023 with the yellow line, and we've surpassed our low points for 2021 and 2022, and it seems that we're on a trajectory to go back in the direction that we were pre-COVID as far as supervision numbers. We're being asked to do that with 17 probation case-bearing positions where we used to have 20. So if you were able to approve us retaining this position, we would be working with 18 case-bearing officers. Currently, I have 17 case-bearing officers because I have, I have 14 case-bearing officers because I have 2 out on long-term disability and 1 that just tenured her resignation to return to college. So I'm supervising 600 individuals in the community with 14 case-bearing staff, which is a record low since I've been in the department in 1999. The cases that we're seeing are also tending to be higher risk, higher needs clients, a lot of complex trauma issues, a lot of complex substance abuse, and also co-occurring mental health issues. So cases that we used to get pre-COVID and pre-bail reform that were tended to be some high risk, but a higher level of moderate and low risk needs, those cases did not take as much time and effort to work on rehabilitative efforts with them because they were a little bit ahead of the curve. A substantial number of the people that we're working with now, where it used to be a 15-minute office visit, it's common that it's a 45-minute office visit, sometimes longer. So I think we're headed towards the potential of a crisis with overworking my staff to the point that they just cannot do quality work that we expect of them with the reduced numbers that we have. It's atypical for us to have 2 people out and 1 person leaving, but it's not atypical for us to have 1 person out at any given point for a medical emergency or family emergency. Of course, we also have to cover for vacations and use of accrual time to provide people with breaks. So when those things happen, we can't just stop seeing the people. We have to distribute them, reassign them temporarily to staff who are there working, and that just increases their workload. I fear a trend where if this isn't corrected, I'm going to start burning people out and they're going to start leaving. I wanted to say that across the state, at our most recent COPA conference, we're seeing it as well in the numbers of people who took our civil service test, but numbers are down for people taking probation civil service exams, and it's going to be more and more difficult to find high quality candidates. The state has also, in January of 2023, changed the training regulations. So instead of a 4-week course of fundamentals for probation practice, we now have to send any new hire to a 9-week basic course for peace officer program. That increases the cost of training a probation officer from $2,000 to $3,000 to $8,000 to $10,000. And that doesn't guarantee that they'll stay. So we can train them, and if there's another county that is closer to where they live or offers higher pay scale or offers a more manageable caseload, that could be enticing for people to become trained on Tompkins County's dime and then take that certification to the county of their choice. I think it's very important that we try to retain the staff that we have. My predecessor always stressed, I haven't had the opportunity to hire many people, but she always stressed hiring the best candidates, and she was successful in that, and we have phenomenal staff that I would hate to lose. We could look at the investigation numbers on the next slide real quickly. I think it supports my concern that we're going to see higher numbers. So this is our investigation levels. So the blue line is 2020 when COVID hit. You can see that it tanks from almost 80 into the 20s, and that trend continued to be low throughout 2020 as the courts were not functioning at their full capacity due to COVID shutdowns and things of that nature. 2021, they started to creep up a little bit. 2022, they were higher than 2021 or 2020. And currently in 2023, month to month, until this month ruined my graph, they've been higher than they have ever been in the last 3 years. We just dipped below it. But if you also look at the previous 3 years, investigations tend to increase towards the end of the year as courts are cleaning out cases that have languished and need to be closed out. So I believe we'll see a reversal of the downward trend for 2023, where it will then it'll then creep back up potentially into the 70s or 80s. That would be my prediction. And I mention that because the pathway to supervision is an investigation. So if we have 60 investigations, as we do today when I left the office, at least 30 of those people are coming our way on probation. So as people come off, we're replacing them at a higher rate than we're actually losing them, which is resulting in the trend in increased supervision numbers. So 14 staff are handling 600 supervisions and 60 investigations as we speak.
Thank you, Dan. That's pretty grim. Does anybody have questions for Dan? Randy?
I hate going first all the time. So I was looking at your staffing, and you had 36 people in 2019, and you're down to 32 budgeted now.
Yes, sir.
How many do you actually have on your staff right now?
Right now we have 31, I believe.
2 of those are out.
Two of those are out, and 1 is resigning in 2 weeks. Thank you.
Anyone else? Mike Lane.
Dan, I don't know whether you said this, but I'm wondering, is there a recommended caseload for probation officers, your associations or other things, and how do we compare?
Typically 50 to 55 for regular supervision level is considered a really effective number. People can manage that and be successful with the clients. Our greatest risk caseloads, drug court caseloads, tend to be less, 30 to 35. We've also experienced a recent uptick where our DWI caseloads are now exploding, where they had kind of calmed down during COVID as well. They were in the mid-20s, and now I have 1 officer with 47 and 1 with 45. So we're seeing increases across the board in all types of crime. We're also seeing a lot more gun crimes and violent crimes winding up on our greatest risk caseloads than we used to in the past. And I think some of that's a result of bail reform, and I think some of that is just there's so many of those types of crimes occurring in the community that a lot of them are winding up with us. We did not typically used to get as many as we currently have. Now that we're a GIV county.
We're a what county?
The gun-involved violence elimination grant was given to Tompkins starting in July. So I believe Friday, Carla assigns our investigations. I believe Friday we got 4 investigations that were GIV qualifying offenses. So I would imagine that we'll get a few of those. Both of my greatest risk caseloads are full. The GIVE grant requirements mandate that anyone put on probation for a gun-involved crime must be on greatest risk supervision for a period of a minimum of 1 year, and they must be on electronic monitoring for a minimum of 6 months. We've always had an established expectation that at least 6 months on greatest risk was a reasonable amount to expect to be able to reduce somebody down to high risk or moderate risk. But now we're mandated to keep them at high risk, so that will take away our objectivity of when a person is ready to be taken off. We will not be able to do that sooner than a year, which will continue to clog up the 2 greatest risk officers that I have right now. I have 4 senior probation officers who volunteered to take overflow GIVE cases, and they'll be training to have more specialization and ability to handle those individuals.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Well, I think you've just stunned us into silence, Dan. I'm sorry that you're having to cope with us. I appreciate you taking the time to come and share the problem with us.
I appreciate your listening and understanding, and we're not in a bad position yet, but I feel like we're headed in one if we don't increase our supervision abilities. So restoring this position would allow us to be a pressure relief valve for some of the officers who are carrying heavy loads right now.
Assuming that, I gather now you have this one open position from the person who resigned, and if this were added back in, do you feel like you've got a candidate pool that would allow you to fill the 2 positions?
We definitely have an active list. There are multiple qualified candidates on there. We have not interviewed anyone yet. When I did ask, I want to thank Lisa, when I did notify her that the person had put in their resignation, within 15 minutes, I was given approval to fill that spot. So thank you for that, Lisa. So the only position we're really discussing is whether or not we can retain the vacant PO title.
Okay, thank you. Greg?
Yeah, thanks to you and the work that your department does. This is more of a procedural question for us, so apologies to bore you with that. Is there a mechanism for us as a legislature to take a position off of the soft hiring list other than the approval of the budget, which will take another 6 to 8 weeks?
Not that I would be aware of. I mean, this soft hiring freeze is part of the budget's effort to meet the 2% fiscal target that we set in April. So I don't see a way to expedite one particular position outside of the budget process, but I'm always willing to be corrected if my understanding is incorrect.
If I may, the interviewing process for the one position that we are able to fill should give us good exposure to a second qualified candidate who's on the civil service list, so that could abbreviate our hiring process once the budget is resolved, should you choose to restore the position.
That's promising. That's good information. Annie, I saw your hand.
Yeah, Dan, for the GIVE grant, your department will be receiving some money. Can you explain how that covers some of your expenses versus what you're also needing this position to be restored?
Yes, I could. Thank you for the question. We received $46,000 of the total grant awarded to Tompkins County. Approximately $20,000 of that is dedicated to overtime pay for senior probation officers. 3/4 of it is dedicated to overtime for senior probation officers, and 1/4 of it is dedicated to time for probation officers should they be needed. About $5,000 is dedicated to travel and training costs because there will be specialized trainings that we haven't had previously that we'll need to get people signed up for and through so that they're more adept and more skilled at the tasks that they'll be asked to complete as GIVE officers. And the remainder, I'm sorry, yeah, thank you very much. The big one, $10,000 in electronic monitoring funds to cover the cost of the 6 months of electronic monitoring for every GIV client.
Thanks, because I'm aware of most of this, being on the public safety, but this will help give us information, to all of us as we go into deliberations that the GIV grants don't cover this position that you're asking to be restored.
Thank you. And it's $1,080 to keep one individual on electronic monitoring for the 6-month period. So we're covered for about 10 GIV cases.
And thank you for what you do regularly, but also participating in the GIV grant, the new initiatives with that.
Thank you very much.
Okay, anyone else? Thank you, Dan. Thank you, staff. I hope we'll be able to alleviate some of the pressure.
Well, thank you very much for listening.
Okay. Next up, we have Derek and Jen, our sheriff. The Sheriff's Department budget pages start at 4-141, and the jail pages start at 4-151.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can.
I think Norma's bringing up our slides. I hope.
Just trying to find it.
You want me to send it to you, Norma? Oh, there you go. Yeah. Okay. Hi, everybody. This year we have a total of 5 over-target requests that you've been presented. I'll just go through them each briefly. The first one is our sheriff clerk positions. These have been a huge asset to both us and our community, we feel. We currently have funding for 2 sheriff clerk positions. However, for most of this last year, we've only been able to fill 1. Unfortunately, with the second position, we've filled it twice, but the first person failed to sign up for the civil service test, so we had to remove that person, and then the second, unfortunately, didn't pass probation. So we're just getting to a point where hopefully we'll have test results back and we can fill that second position. It did take us a long time to work with HR to come up with the appropriate civil service test, and we're now waiting for the test results before we consider filling the second position, and that one was recommended by county administration. The second one that was not recommended is the continuation of the additional 2 deputies. If you recall last budget year, these 2 positions were put in place by a legislator amendment. Up until that point, I had spoken for several years about our need to better staff our road patrol, to lower overtime, reduce response times, and appropriately fill all our patrol zones, at least on the 3 to 11 shift. That has not been able to come to fruition yet due to hiring issues. We'd like to continue filling the positions. We feel we still need them desperately. We've invested heavily in promoting these positions on our most recent civil service exam and spent a great deal of time in our recruiting efforts. We just feel that taking these positions away now would do a huge disservice to our office and the community that we serve and our ever-increasing demands that are put upon us. As you all know, we've had to support the city of Ithaca more and more over the last few years, and we're simply not equipped to keep up with the pace expected of us. Contrary to what the city's experiencing, our recruitment for the most part has remained much stronger. We have no doubts that we'd be able to fill these positions once we get our test results back. And I would just ask you to keep in mind if you do consider approving these, like I'm asking you to, that it will probably be halfway through next year before we're able to even fill them. Just by the time we get the test results back and get background investigations done and get the training put in place. Number 3, our continuation of the crisis response unit, our care team, that was approved by county administration. That just begun its work in the previous couple weeks. It's going well, I believe. So obviously we want to see that continue. The last one on that screen is Axon. That's a company we contract with to provide our officer-worn body cameras. They record all our interactions with the community and the public, and they provide accountability for our officers and also prevent a great deal of liability for the county based on false allegations made against our employees. And they also help us identify training issues if we have an issue with an employee as well. We have more employees simply since this original contract was initiated. This is simply asking for the equipment needed to put a body camera on all our deputies. This day and age, 2023, we simply can't have deputies out there running around without body cameras on them. We also included in this new negotiated contract enough to get started with our correction officers in the jail wearing body cams. If you're familiar with the system we have up there now, we do have some stationary cameras in there that are black and white. There's no audio with them. And they simply don't capture all the interactions our COs have with our inmates on a daily basis. Just like on road patrol, probably even more so in our jail, we get in pretty volatile situations with inmates at times. We often can't see those interactions on the camera systems we have in place. And if we can see them, like I said, we can't hear anything that's going on. It makes it very hard for us to determine if the appropriate level of force is being used, if the interaction is being had appropriately. And again, adding that to our facility will greatly reduce our potential for liability and false accusations. Next slide. The last one is increased training for our road patrol. We have a slide that looks just like this on the jail. As you know, just a few years ago, we only had $10,000 each, $10,000 for our road patrol to conduct training and $10,000 for our correction officers, and it was that way stagnant for a long, long time. Through our own savings in the budget, we were able to up that to $20,000 on each side. That's gone a long, long way, but we need to keep going. And I feel that if this is provided, this should easily take us well into the future. And I would also ask you, before you consider rejecting the request, keep in mind that, 3/4 of our road patrol now has a very short amount of time on the job. We just hired 12 brand new correction officers. All need to go to training. All are far off from being trained to the values that we hold at the Sheriff's Office. We've been able to maintain a very professional, positive Sheriff's Office for our community, and it's partly due to the training that we're able to provide. And I think we need to still continue investing in that, at least just a little bit more, and especially when we have so many new people on the books that it's going to take us, 2-3 years to get them up to where they need to be. And then, like I said, there's one more slide. That is probably the worst picture of the jail we probably could have added to our presentation. I've never seen that hallway so empty, so I don't know how we captured that image, but it looks dreadful. But anyway, like I said, the over-target request for the correction side of our operation is the same thing for the increase of training fee expenses that we're asking for. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Derek. Questions? Mike Lane.
Derek, I like your emphasis on training. I think that's so important. Could you tell me how many of your deputies are trained to recognize DWI drugs as opposed to DWI alcohol, for example? I know it's much more difficult.
I'll let the drug recognition expert answer that.
So I was the only drug recognition expert in the sheriff's office. I recently let that certification expire because of my other obligations as the undersheriff kind of overwhelmed me with that. But we do have, I would say, 30% of our office is trained in ARIDE, which is a step below a drug recognition expert. It's 2 days of training rather than weeks and weeks of it, but we are sending people to ARIDE certification as those trainings come up.
And are they apprehending folks that are DWI drug?
Yes, we are making arrests. I'm not quite sure if you're aware of there's some discussion on the state level. We're unable to prosecute a DWI drugs charge unless we can name the specific drug that person is on. So unless they submit to a blood sample, and then we're able to get a positive result back, you can't charge that person with DWI drugs without being able to link that to a specific drug. So say if you arrest someone under the suspicion of driving while mobility impaired by drugs, they don't submit to a blood sample, or the blood sample comes back with no drugs detected because it's very limited on what drugs certain labs test for, you wouldn't have a successful prosecution. So right now in the state legislature, they're trying to come up with a more comprehensive definition of what a drug is. If that makes any sense.
Okay, I know it's a pretty hard place there, but, with the legalization of cannabis and other things here, frankly, when I'm driving to Ithaca or back from Ithaca and there's a line of cars coming the other direction, I'm always hopeful that I'm not encountering someone who's not fit to drive. Let's put it that way. So thank you for that response. And I had just one other question, if I may.
Yes, you may.
Derek, how many corrections officers are in the public safety building usually?
Per shift or?
Yeah, well, how many corrections officers are there, and then how many would be in the building on a regular basis?
Yeah, there's roughly, 6 to 8 per shift on duty, depending on the shift, plus a records officer and things like that. Altogether, I think we're, 40?
35 corrections officers and 6 sergeants. The day shift usually operates with 10 to 12 corrections officers. The afternoon shift usually operates with 8 to 10, and then the overnights usually operates between 5 and 7.
That's with everybody.
That's
sergeants.
So there's 30-some that you have in corrections?
35 corrections officers and 6 sergeants, so a total of 41. And then
41 of our employees are in the public safety building on that side. And then every day, I assume there are employees on the road patrol side.
Absolutely.
And the civil side.
Yes. Yep.
All right. So I think it's important that we keep in mind that our public safety building has many of our employees in it.
Thank you.
If I could add just one thing on the training, is I believe it was last year, the county moved to a new meal reimbursement plan to update the costs, and that significantly had an impact on our training budget, because now it's costing us a lot more to send someone to a training because of meal reimbursements and hotel accommodations. So that really impacted our budget, and I also think that speaks to why we need to see an increase in that.
Thank you for remembering that. Yeah.
Randy?
Yes, thank you. appreciate what the Sheriff's Department is doing. A lot more visibility in Newfield and Enfield, and I actually met one of your new deputies the other day, and she was very pleasant, professional, so I just wanted to share with you. In 2019, you had 46 people in the Sheriff's Office, and now this budget's going to take it to 60. I realize the need has changed an awful lot in that period of time, and you are covering for other jurisdictions. My question is, does the Sheriff's Department also staff the airport?
Yes. Yes, we do.
How many sheriff deputies are stationed there?
We got it's SROs we're using now, special police officers, but they're still our employees. There's one there per day in the morning and then one in the evening.
They're not there full-time?
So they have to be there when the gates are open, so their shifts run from 4 a.m. to 12 p.m. and then 12 p.m. to 8 a.m. 7 days a week. We provide security at the airport 16 hours a day. The sheriff, and we worked with county administration and the airport because they're struggling, and they reimburse us for our salary and fringe rates for the deputy to be there. So we recognized our staffing issue and their need to be fiscally responsible, so we were able to work with county administration and within our own budget create 6 special patrol officers. We pay them at a lower rate than a regular deputy sheriff, and the fringe rate is nearly 30% less because they are not receiving the benefits. So we were able to do that within our budget, and that helps us with staffing because we're not pulling a road deputy to provide that security, and it also helps the airport because we're able to maintain a budgeted service for security that they could afford.
Yeah, and we're really limited on what we can use them for. We can only use them for building security and inmate transports at times. We also, if they have downtime and the gates are closed, we try to park them in our school parking lots to make a presence. Try to use them at every possible minute that they're on for the best we can.
Yeah, because I know the last flight in the morning leaves at like 6:30.
Yeah.
And the next flight doesn't come in till like 3 o'clock in the afternoon or something like that.
Yeah, it's one of those things that it does create some downtime, unfortunately, but we're required to do it and don't have much say in that, unfortunately.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, I've got Veronica and Annie.
Yeah, thank you. My question was about the equipment OTR. For body cameras and tasers reading in here, and it looks like it comes out to roughly $1,000 a year per piece of equipment, which just seems like a lot, but obviously I don't know what this entails. And I realize there's a lot of service in the contract, but do you own the equipment itself, or are you essentially renting it? How does this work, I guess?
So the equipment, it's currently right now we have 30 tasers and 40 body-worn cameras, but what comes with that is a replacement plan. So every 2.5 years they replace all the tasers and body-worn cameras because technology is always advancing. Or if a piece of equipment gets damaged, they will replace it. They also provide the docking systems that we need to charge those. They provide signal sidearm, which means anytime it's a piece of technology that anytime someone draws their firearm or their taser, it automatically starts their body-worn camera. That comes with unlimited storage data for the body-worn camera, which is a huge cost. It also comes with tagging information, so when a body-worn camera is activated, it automatically tags to the records management system without somebody having to go in there and manually doing that anymore. It comes with redaction tools such as blurring and autofocus that we use to help the DA prosecute cases. And so much more. So yeah, if you're thinking about it just as equipment, it seems like a lot, but it comes with a significant amount. It comes with training cartridges. We have to train people annually in it. It's required. And it comes with the training cartridges. We need to do that as well as a certification to get 2 to 3 instructors trained. They'll provide that training for free as well.
Yeah, and as it is, and how the contract is, we're not asking for funding for a body cam for every single correction officer. We try to reuse them as we can. They do need time to charge and then upload the images caught on that. So we tried to be reasonable in what we're asking for and realize that, this is something new that we're trying to bring into our jail.
That makes sense. I'm sure you told me this before, but how long do you keep body camera footage if there's no like investigation or anything attached to it?
So that's another thing that it's offered. It has automatic retention set to it. So if it's a violation, we'll keep that for 6 months. Misdemeanors, or it depends, a year to 5 years, and felonies we'll usually keep 10 years. Then we'll tag it if it's a use of force, or we're using it for an internal affairs investigation. We'll maintain that indefinitely.
But how long do you keep it if it's like nothing happened necessarily?
But
Or
we follow New York State's education laws as far as retention goes. So whatever those retention laws are in New York State, we follow those.
So let me just follow up, because I had a question about this contract. This is an increase over the previous contract. You've already signed this contract, right?
So the contract we originally signed was in the end of 19, so we're entering our 4th year. We've talked to Axon, and they will let us renew a new contract, which would have all of our equipment on the same replacement schedule. That's one of the advantages of doing this, and that would take us all the way through 2028. If we did it a la carte or piecemealed it, the equipment we have now, the 45 cameras and the 30 tasers, that contract would expire at the end of 2025. And then we would have, the extra 20 and 15 that would take us to 2028. But it would be more expensive to do the a la carte. It'd be around $53,000 annually. So it's like a $12,000 savings to do it all together. And at that way, we would be on the same replacement schedule and would make it easier for all of us. So we're not coming back to you again in a year.
I understand that, and it's good to know that. I'm just trying to determine if we've already contracted for this additional $41,000.
No.
Okay. All right. Annie?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate you taking the initiative to have your officers in the jail to wear the body-worn cameras. So this will be officers and sergeants, right? And so now, for deputies, they turn them on when they start an interaction with somebody. Is that correct? So will these be different?
No, I think it would run the same way. Yeah. It'd probably be on a lot more because they're interacting with inmates almost constantly, so.
So whenever they have an interaction, they tap it and turn it on?
Yes.
Okay. And is this the type of thing that's in other facilities around the state or country?
It's getting to be that way, yeah.
Okay, for more transparency in records, that makes sense. And so I'm assuming this is something that you can do administratively to require these. It doesn't need to go through union negotiations or anything.
And if you recall, when we updated a lot of our policies when we first took office, we created by policy a very stringent review procedure that goes up through the chain of command at the sheriff's office, that we randomly just pick body camera footage, even if we don't believe it's associated with much of anything. And it goes through a review process just to make sure everything's happening appropriately, constitutionally, and we use it to identify training needs if we need to, and identify wrongdoing if we have to, but fortunately that hardly ever happens.
And last question is, if you had an incident there, like say somebody was, because the way that it's broken up your areas there, there's some safety concerns for everybody there. Would it be the type of thing where if somebody was in a situation that somebody could monitor that live so that they could see what's going on, if somebody was in a dangerous situation?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that.
This technology does allow that. We haven't utilized it thus far on the road, but we have discussed it for tactical situations. We've discussed the option of doing that. But yes, again, that's a good point. We could potentially look at that. And one of the biggest downfalls about the security cameras we have in the jails, they don't capture footage in the cells, rightfully so. And most of the time, the interactions that we would be interested in reviewing happen in the cells.
Right.
So it makes it really difficult to review that, and that's why having body-worn camera footage would be very helpful, just to make sure we're avoiding any situations that could face potential liability or just provide training.
And I'm sure I don't have to explain to you that behavior changes when you're wearing one of those at times for certain people. So it's a good thing.
Are you suggesting that legislators should get one? It's, oh, maybe we can talk offline. Thank you.
Okay, I've got Shauna and then Greg.
Hi, I was a little bit confused in regards to the addition of 2 deputies OTR for Target. I see that it was, that the Sheriff's Department was asking for move to Target. That was not approved. And then I looked at the county administrator recommendation, and it says unable to recommend this year due to fiscal constraints, recommended continuing as one time. However, I don't see it on our spreadsheet as one time.
Yeah.
Modification, right?
Okay. Okay, so that, just to confirm, so that will continue to be recommended for one time, which will come out of our fund balance. Okay, very good, thank you.
And further to that, that particular OTR, those 2 positions have not been filled, is that correct, to date? Okay. Okay, Greg.
Yeah, thanks, appreciate this. I think the body cams in the corrections facility makes a lot of sense. You mentioned some technology where if a weapon or taser is drawn, it automatically triggers the response for the body camera to turn on. Within the corrections division, is there any mechanism other than physically turning the camera on that would, start automatically recording if there was an incident? And then also, is there any policy that if a body camera isn't turned on during an interaction, is there opportunity for discipline or corrective action if that continues to be an issue with body cameras not being turned on or prompted?
To answer your second question first.
Yes.
Yeah, it's policy that when you'll use your body camera, and just violating that policy alone is means for discipline. Yes.
As far as the technology inside the jail, they don't have tasers or firearms. The only less lethal option they have is OC, and there's pepper spray. There isn't the technology at this point to put a side signal on the pepper spray holder, so to speak. But if one body cam is activated and other people come into a close proximity to that body-worn camera, their body-worn cameras are automatically activated too. And that happens on the road. We've been experienced that. The state police just recently started wearing body cameras, and we that realization that if one body cam is activated, whether they're from the same agency or not, it automatically activates the others. So yes, there is that technology.
Appreciate that, thank you.
Anybody else? Okay. Thank you, Derek. Thank you, Jen. Always good to see you. And you know what, y'all? Let's take like 5 minutes, and then we'll hear from Kate.
Can we turn our body cameras off?
Yeah, and definitely turn your mics off. Okay, Kate, we are going to hear from the Youth Services Department and the Recreation Partnership. And those are on pages 4-210 and 4-218 of your book.
All right, okay. I'm going to share my screen.
Plan ahead.
Maybe. Okay, Teresa, is that out there in the world? Can you see that? Thumbs up?
Yep.
Good. Awesome. Okay, guys. Great. So we're going to try to keep this as crisp and short for you guys as possible. So we're an hour ahead of schedule, so we'll get started. Thanks for the opportunity to come speak with you tonight. Also, I'm going to try to talk louder and slower. So if at any point you can't hear me or I'm talking too fast, just give me some kind of sign. I'll slow down. So thanks for the opportunity to come speak with you. Obviously, I'm Kate. I'm the director of the Youth Services Department, and I also want to acknowledge that Teresa Albert, my deputy director, is here via Zoom to help us answer any questions that might come up for youths. Before we get started for this presentation, I wanted to frame the discussion that we're about to have a little bit. I know by now, I think we can all agree that we've heard this is a tight budget year. You have a lot of OTRs coming before you and a lot of difficult decisions to make. And the truth is that nobody really likes to talk about youth services in terms of dollars and cents. We oftentimes like to talk about the heartwarming story of the youth's life who is, saved by the project done by local programming. And those are important stories, and we do want to tell those. But I think in a time like this one, it is really tight. It's important that we do talk about things in terms of dollars and cents. Because we know that youth that don't get the services and interventions that they need now grow up to be adults that need more expensive services and interventions later on. And oftentimes those are provided by the Departments of Social Service, Whole Health, or Probation. And in addition, many of those adults go on to have interactions with our criminal justice system, which just compounds those costs to the county. Investing in youth is a good idea, not just because it makes us feel good, but because money invested today saves the county money later on. So it's important that I provide some context for exactly what those services are I'm asking you to invest in. In front of you here, it's important to think about our youth services in a form of a continuum. Many of you have been around a while. You've probably seen this before. If you're not, if you're new, I think it's been around a really, really long time, but it does a really good job of sort of giving you a glimpse of the way we look at our continuum. We believe that this approach is not a one-size-fits-all, and this stacking approach gives us the ability to target different audiences with different types of services that they need for them to thrive in all areas of their life. The most important thing for you to note here in this slide is that as a youth goes up the pyramid, the dollar cost per youth for those services increases, and the number of youth served in those higher rungs of that continuum goes down. Which is why we really like to focus our attention on the bottom three tiers. Because again, when we get to the top tier, we're usually talking about residential placements, which are very expensive, and given lack of that availability for those services in our county, that's oftentimes out of county, which is that much more expensive. What I want to do next is just take this a little bit further, since I haven't had a chance to talk to some of you about this sort of thing, and explain to you how what we're about to talk about actually is attached to programs that are on the ground. The bottom, we have our universal prevention, which is our recreation partnership. This is tied to over target request. Obviously, that will be the last one that we're going to talk about tonight, but this intermunicipal partnership provides youth development and recreation opportunities to an average of 5,000 youth each year. Several of those youth are low income. They come from single parent households, and they also face a myriad of other barriers. As we move up.
Could I ask you to slow down just a little bit?
Yes, thank you.
You're giving us a lot of good information, and it's...
Sure, yep, nope, absolutely. As we move up our continuum to the early interventions, we get into the municipal youth service system. This is too directly impacted by an OTR that we're going to discuss tonight. This program impacts youth in every municipality in the county. Through the youth commissions and our collaborations with those municipalities, we provide free targeted youth development programming to youth who come from rural, low-income, and marginalized families. Our department provides technical assistance to each of our local planning bodies with things like community needs assessments, annual program evaluations, data collection, and the creation of their annual budgets. Just for scale, we're talking about 8 planning bodies approximately 60 volunteers across the county. That comes to about 1,100 volunteered hours a year that is dedicated to this, that our office helps to oversee. As we move up to the third rung, we obviously get to our funded agencies and some other target initiatives that I did want to highlight here. This is also impacted by one of the OTRs that we're going to talk about tonight. But as you can see, we fund 4 youth-serving agencies that support several different programs that provide free programming that reaches hundreds of youth each year. Those programs cover topics ranging from life skills, mentoring, youth development assistance, housing, and education disparities. We also support several countywide services through our office, such as the placement of the Tompkins County Runaway and Homeless Youth Coordinator and the Tompkins County Safe Harbor, or CSEC, which stands for the Commercial Sexual Exploitation of Children. We work closely with our local Collaborative Solutions Network, Tompkins County Continuum of Care, and the Advocacy Center to help administer those services and partnerships across the county. In addition, we also provide free youth development training to our community partners on a variety of topics. Typically, those topics are derived from needs assessments we do, seeing gaps in local services or programs, or the lack of knowledge for best practices to provide administrative support to the direct staff providing those services to the youth. So with that framework, we can jump into the 3 OTRs that I have for you this evening that are our department related. The first one that I want to jump into here is the Youth Service Specialist. I wanted to provide a bit of historic context for you. As you can see here in our FTEs, in 2020, our department lost 1 FTE to the early retirement initiative that was offered by the county to reduce the budget in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. As you can see, that FTE was not restored. And in response to that, our department worked hard to restructure and streamline how we operate to maximize efficiencies without impacting the quality of services that we provide to our community partners, all that with 4 FTEs. What this chart does not show you is that in June of 2022, we lost 2 FTEs, or 50% of our staff, 1 to county administration, and the other to an executive director position with a local child care provider. So for several months in 2022, Teresa and I were the only staff trying to keep up with everything that we do in our department. We were able to, in 2021, hire another FTE from one of our local service providers. He was a great add to our department. He's been with us about a year. However, his responsibilities really circle and really focus around that municipal youth service system, which I mentioned earlier is quite massive, and there are a lot of moving parts, and it takes about a year for a person to sort of get comfortable with that, to go through the budget processes. So Teresa and I have taken on additional commissions, and we have been attending meetings with him to get him up to speed. So effectively what this means is that for the last year, we have been operating with less than 3 FTEs. It's important to note, because one of the reasons that this particular petition was targeted by the county administrator was because it was vacant. I want to be clear that I want to give you some context and understand that it's not because this position is not needed, but rather because we were trying to keep things afloat and the significant internal shifting with staff and onboarding of new staff, we've been a little busy. I felt it was important to pause and figure out both how we needed to build our current department's capacity, but also allow us to be flexible and responsive to the many emerging needs we are seeing on the horizon for youth development. So we used our annual planning process to determine exactly what that would mean, and also to be good fiscal stewards of taxpayer dollars. What essentially this means is that we had, in 2023, we had an administrative 3 position. It was a 35-hour-a-week position that was on our roster, and really through our planning, what we discovered is that we really needed a youth service specialist, which is a position that was previously held by our department. Both of these will be 35 hours a week, but it's a really important thing for us to be able to get this, to be able to fill this. We were actually in the process of starting to fill this when we got the call from Lisa that this was going to be a hired freeze, soft hiring freeze now, and would be unfunded and put in as an OTR in 2024. So should you decide to fund it, we are ready to move as soon as the budget is approved. And so basically what's the impact? Randy asked, if this doesn't happen, what then happens? This would mean that this would be our 2nd FTE that our already small department has lost in 4 years. We'll be losing 25% or a quarter of our department's capacity. It will impede our ability to provide the same level of quality technical assistance to both our funded agencies and our municipalities. It will eliminate annual initiatives like this summer camp guide, the school listing, and make it very difficult to support the program assistant work after that funding is gone. Finally, it will prevent us from taking on new initiatives, such as our first ever role of providing technical assistance to all youth-serving organizations in the county to make their programs more diverse, equitable, and inclusive to all youth. many of those with visible or invisible disabilities and/or mental health challenges. In the wake of COVID-19, we have heard from all kinds of service providers, after-school providers, that the mental health crisis that we're facing is causing behavior issues. Then the staffing is just simply, they're just not equipped. And so being able to have a person in the county that can be a resource and connect these people to resources is going to be very, very important. You know, a lot of ways we've moved beyond COVID, but the impacts to our kids, we're going to be seeing for several years. And this is definitely a need, and I think it's something that falls clearly within our mission in our department and would be able to be a value add to the county, and I think a good thing for us to do. I also think that, you know, it just really, it really is. We've often thought of ourselves as the backbone of the county youth services. A lot of youth service.
You're fading from your microphone, and at the speed you talk, that's not good.
I'm backing up. A lot of youth-serving agencies are so busy providing the services that they don't have the time to think about big picture. And so this is something that they have asked us to do, and something we had planned to do with this position. So that is the first OTR. Is there any questions on that before I move on, or do you want to just have me?
Does anyone have questions? Looks like you can move on.
All right. Second OTR is the project assistant continuation. And this was funded in the county administrator's budget. And in 2023, our department received a $40,000 OTR through an amendment brought forward by legislator Randy Brown. To date, we have used about half of those funds. I did want to report out a little bit to you guys to tell you that over the last year, we've been able to hire a project assistant that's been working about 25 hours a week on the first phase of our project. And that really was to create a mapping of current youth services and programming in Tompkins County, giving us an inventory of mental health, youth development, educational, and recreational services available. We have completed that first phase in Groton, Newfield, the city of Ithaca, the town of Ithaca, Dryden, and Danby. We've also begun to work with community partners like 211 and the Collaborative Solutions Network to create a searchable database that will be for these services specifically focused on youth and will provide a much more user-friendly interface than they oftentimes get in 211. Services for youth are listed, but it's counterintuitive, and you have to have very specific language to find services, and it can be very difficult for families to be able to access that. And so this was another thing that we have heard from people that they would like to see, and our community partners are very excited about this project. This OTR that was supported in the recommended budget allows us to continue with phase one with that work in Ulysses and in Trumansburg, Enfield, and Lansing. In addition to doing the second phase, which will be hosting a series of community cafes to determine what barriers youth face, obstacles to knowing about these services, using these services, and what gaps there are in the services that are needed or wanted by the families. Finally, this OTR will support the creation of a report that will be providing to the legislature that will give a series of recommendations for you for your further consideration for ways that you might invest in youth development in Tompkins County in the 2025 budget season or beyond. Third OTR, and this is the one that affects our agencies and municipalities. We're asking for a 2% increase for both our agencies and our municipalities here. Each year at your annual budget, the legislature determines what percentage COLA increase they would like to give to their directly funded agencies. Our agencies and our municipalities are not included in that group of contracts. So historically, each year, our department has submitted an OTR to match that COLA increase and to our directly funded contractors. Every dollar that's invested in the youth service budget here is matched dollar for dollar by our county. So this additional investment of $17,635 really equates to a total increase in youth development's money in 2024 to the tune of about $35,228.
It's matched by whom, Kate?
Municipalities and the agencies that receive funding.
Thank you.
So it leverages other dollars. It's important to do this because these organizations and municipalities have struggled, just like every other direct contractor with the county, to meet the ever-increasing needs of youth in our community, especially when we talk about historic levels of inflation, staff turnover, and the mental health crisis that our youth are facing. Those are the three department OTRs that we have. The last one is the rec partnership. This over-target request is for about $7,600. And again, this intermunicipal agreement has been around for about 30 years. It's been held up as an example at the state and national levels as what true municipal multi-intermunicipal collaboration should be. In 2022, Tompkins County, along with all the other municipalities involved, signed a new 5-year contract that runs 2023 to 2027. In that contract, Tompkins County agreed to be a keystone supporter of the rec partnership, paying a quarter of that annual budget. We are joined in this keystone level of support from the city of Ithaca and the town of Ithaca, who pay the same amount respectively and plan to do so in their 2024 budget. The last quarter of the budget for the rec partnership is split up among smaller municipalities based on a formula that considers assessed property tax and a 3-year average participation rate. This collaboration works and is successful with the understanding that each member of the rec partnership maintains their contribution at the same level as other partners. The county legislator liaisons to the rec partnership board did agree to this increase when it was brought forward in meetings earlier this year. And if the county does not approve the $7,600 increase, because all of the partners move in tandem and other partners would follow our lead, the $7,600 OTR could turn into $37,000 plus decrease in available services. So it's important that we do that. Thank you for your time in considering these over-target requests. Are there any questions?
Questions for Kate, Mike Lane, and then Amanda.
Recreation Partnership. Deja vu. Remember when it got started? The county was only going to be in it for 3 years. And then eventually, because of the small municipalities that needed help, we took on doing what we're doing now. I kind of hope we never had to see it again, but here it is because of the need for the over-target. My question is, the municipalities were funding with this. And I realize that you showed us the contract goes to 2027, but are they still in as much need of this money from the county as they were 30 years ago?
Absolutely.
Or 10 years ago? Or?
Absolutely. One of the biggest driving costs for this budget is the increase in minimum wage, which I believe is $14.20, and it's now going up to $15. And because it's a contract for service with the Ithaca Youth Bureau, they have seasonal staff. So you bring people in at $15 an hour. That means the rest of the staff has to be paid at higher levels. So it is seasonal, but it is it's really an investment, and it's a good partnership. And because of that, and just the cost of things alone, yes, they are in need of the money.
But I'm not asking about our contractor. I'm asking about the municipalities who the county is stepping up for. Are they still in as much need as they were previously?
Yeah, no, I absolutely think they are. I think that, it's not just tight budget year for us, it's a tight budget year for all the smaller municipalities. And most of them are doing a 2% increase in place for youth development because they're matching what the county has historically done. Increase for this particular program. It serves roughly I think in 2017 was a little over 7,000. Last year was about 4, and that was really because in COVID it dropped to about 921 youth, I believe is what the chart said. So there's no way that the municipalities could afford to pay the increase if they didn't have the county money.
Thank you.
Amanda and then Dan.
I'm good. I pass.
Dan?
Just on that last subject, I mean, I don't think it's right to say that we're giving them money. I mean, every municipality is chipping in.
Yes.
So we're chipping in our part, they're chipping in their part. Might be helpful to see the Recreation Partnership report breaking down by municipality. You'll see that we're all getting served. It's all.
Sure, absolutely. I can send that to you. We do have that, yes.
And similarly, I wanted to ask about the initiative that started last year that you said halfway through, the mapping of the youth services. And can we see what you've done so far, or is it not really presentable yet?
So we can do a basic report of where we are, but we still have about half of the county to talk to. And so, I can speak to trends that we're seeing, that we could put that together for you. But I would like to wait just so we can see at least when the first phase is done.
When the product is done, is it going to be a town-by-town thing, or?
Yes, you'll be able to look town by town.
Yeah.
But the towns that were done already aren't quite ready to,
So we've gone through and we have spoken to school partners, recreation partners, obviously our commission, and then any other large serving agencies that serve youth in each of those communities. And it's a high level look, and so we can create a list for those and then provide what's through the county. I don't think that it will look that much different with the rest of the municipalities that we have to talk to, but I do think that we have seen enough that I would like to wait to be able to speak to trends until I can be a little bit more sure about the data.
if it's not ready for prime time, then I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Hey.
Yes, I was on the Community Mental Health Services Board, and they were talking about youth with disabilities and how there's certain requirements that are required that weren't being fulfilled for whatever reason. How, with the youth service specialist, how could you address those requirements and needs?
Absolutely. Thank you. That's a good question. So the youth service specialist would be a point of contact and be able to point people to resources. For example, one of the things that we do is host a monthly youth planning task force where summer camp providers come and talk to us. And so this person would be able to convene those individuals, have conversations, bring resources, we can bring training, and really connect them with local resources. Oftentimes, it's not as difficult to make the modifications or the adjustments that are needed to the programming for the youth, but programs get very scared because they start thinking about lawsuits or they start thinking about coverage for their staff, or there's a lot of different things. So they just don't know. And so this would be a valuable resource to be able to provide guidance and connect to resources stress that those people are facing.
I know with summer camps, that's been a struggle.
Yeah.
In Newfield and Enfield, the demand for summer camps has gone up quite a bit. And there are a lot of youth that don't have the money to pay for that. And so they do give grants, but they ran out of grant money in both places. So there were some kids that, because their family didn't have funds, just couldn't go. So.
Important to note too that a lot of the youth that were on the verge of having mental health issues, needing IEPs, were functioning, but COVID really pushed them over the edge. So the number of youth that we're seeing that are needing this particular service or these additional supports is pretty staggering. So it's behavior issues. Not this summer, but the summer before, I was talking to a rural partner who was running our summer camps, who said that 5-year-old puncher in the face because he was upset about something. He didn't know how to talk. He didn't know how to use his words, so he turned to violence. A lot of sexually explicit comments are made, or other things that youth are just not age appropriate. And the staff that are coming in don't know how to address it. And so, it starts in school and it spills over into the after-school programs and then also to the summer programs. And families they're overwhelmed. They don't have the ability to respond in ways that they might otherwise be able to do. And so this is important work for us to step in and do.
Thanks, Kate.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. I know that you probably all think that we're done, but we're not. Lisa and Norma have asked if they could take a few minutes of our time and kind of go over the capital plan and where we are with capital allocations and fund balance. And then I've got a few words I want to say apropos of Greg's question earlier this evening. So take it away, Lisa.
Deborah, thank you, Kate.
Thank you.
Okay, so part of this I've already covered in my presentation to the legislature, but I just wanted to make sure that everyone, because the capital budget is a sizable part of the budget, I wanted to make sure that all of the legislators had a chance to ask questions or just to clarify what was in and out of the capital budget and how we're paying for it. So So we're just going to be talking about the capital, what's the fund balance, and some impacts on the reserve policy changes. So starting with the capital. We're crisp. We're not that crisp. So this was, again, covered in my presentation overall to the legislature, and the PAR forms, the project approval request forms, were reviewed at the various program committees, but these are the projects, the capital projects that are included in the 5-year capital program, including, and that will be funded in 2024 in the capital program. So all that you see before you here, I won't go through them one by one. And again, these are the projects that have been modified from previous capital plans or that we are deferring. Again, in order to reach our 2% target, we reduced the natural infrastructure by $200,000, the Bridge New York Culvert Reserve by $200,000, fleet management by $100,000, and ITS computer replacement by about $100,000. We have, for the public safety building, currently planned for the schematic design to be funded in 2025. The airport rescue firefighter building is currently deferred with permission of the FTA. The CDL testing site we've deferred and are looking for other sites that would be revenue neutral to host that. And green facilities phases 2 and 3 are deferred. Just want to make sure if anybody has any questions on any of those, I'm happy to.
Oh, boy. Okay, we got Randy, we got Mike.
I just wanted, because Ariel corrected me, the green facilities phase is about a third of number 2 is being done. They joined that into number 1, I guess. So I just
yes.
Maybe it was more than that, but he corrected me, so.
Thank you. Yes, because in order to, because of the costs, they changed the scope under phase 1. So that's a good point. Thank you, Randy.
Mike?
2 things. The public safety building, even if we do schematics in 2025, that doesn't mean it's dead in the water in 2024. We can begin talking about that and trying to determine what engineering firm we might want to use, for example.
Sure.
And the CDL testing site, are we making any progress there? Because I know we were looking for sites, and some of them we had looked at years ago and hadn't happened. And I'm just wondering whether we're just deferring that, looking for sites that might not be there instead of thinking about how we can move this forward.
The conversations continue, and Norma, so we have continued to work with the state DMV and local partners in exploring potential sites. So that has continued.
Okay, I understand that, but at some point we might want to do an executive session and understand better what the chances of having that be successful are.
Okay. Then moving on to our fund balance and reserves, and as we know from the general revenue summary page and last legislature meeting where we accepted the audit for 2022, the figures for the audited revenues were given to us. Our general fund balance is based on 18% of the audited revenues of the most recent year. So 18% of 2022's revenues amounted to $37,484, essentially. our unassigned.
37 million.
Thank you very much.
I wish 37,000 would be enough.
Yeah, 37 million. The total unassigned fund balance at the end of 2022 was 72 million. So that of the 72 million, the 37 million would constitute our 18%. That would seem to leave us with a net of 34 million. Going back to, Randy had a question on the previous slide.
Randy?
So I went through the 2022 audit report and took a lot of notes and realized I was more confused than when I started going through it. And I actually have contacted Lori, and I'm going to meet with her, and she's going to educate me. But in that report, it said that the unallocated fund balance unassigned was 87 million. So it's right on page 5. So I'm just curious.
That's as of 12/31.
That also includes all the fund balances. This is the general fund.
That said it was the, okay, maybe, and that's part of my, probably the way it's pronounced. For example, in that report, they used restricted and assigned and unassigned, whereas the report in August didn't show that we had those things specifically put in those fields. So I'm confused by that. So I just want to let you know. So, but I'll certainly figure it out.
That's why we're here to help.
Yeah, and that's what we're trying to, we'd like to be able to share the information so that everyone has the same information and we're at least on the same page about where we currently stand. So, so that leaves us with this quote-unquote net available fund balance of 34 million. So that everyone is aware of what is currently planned for or assumed in the capital program. For 2024, there is a planned expenditure of 4.8, almost 4.9 million of the fund balance in 2024 in the capital program. Part of that is, if you'll recall, we had planned to use I want to say a third of our ARPA funding toward capital. We had to change some of that and instead use the ARPA funding toward the community recovery, and then we committed.
We took that amount and put it into cash for capital.
Cash for capital. So you'll see some of those projects in 2024 and 2025. Some of the highway projects, et cetera, as well as Center for Government and some other projects. So that's 2024, almost 4.9 million in capital. In the 2% recommended budget that I have provided you with, it includes 1.2 million in one-time OTRs and 2.4 million in multi-year OTRs. So for a total of 8.5, almost 8.6 million in planned use of fund balance in the 2024 budget, in the recommended 2024 budget.
You have a question, Greg?
Yeah, just to understand this 8.4, if you go back to the last slide, sorry, 8.5, forgive me.
Yep.
This 8.5 would come out of the net available fund balance.
Yep, that's correct.
So that 34 million with 2024's budget as it's been presented is reduced, if approved in its way that it was presented, is reduced by 8.5 million.
Correct.
I just want to make sure that.
Yep.
There's more to come.
Randy?
You going to talk about what our revenue is this year versus our expenses this year? Meaning what will our rollover be of fund balance?
No, not in
I
this.
calculated around 9 million, I'll be curious how close I am. So,
The prediction for
revenue, so expenses will be $9 million less than our revenue. That's what I'm calculating.
in
for this year.
2023.
For this year.
So that would augment the fund balance, is what you're saying? Yeah, okay, that's fair. But we can only look at what it is now because we don't know what it's going to be at the end of the year. And wait, there's more because we're going to be falling short of whatever our fund balance policy requires before we add back in that excess for 2023.
Okay, so this past month, the legislature approved a reserve policy, which set minimums to fund all of the reserves that are listed before us: debt service, capital reserve, self-insurance reserve, contingent fund, workers' comp, and unemployment reserve. So the policy was set, and this month we will be coming forward with the resolution to allocate the funds according to the policy. So according to the policy, I think it was a minimum of 1 year of debt service, bond payments would populate the debt service reserve, and so on. It was, these amounts were calculated and set according to the policy, and this month this will be coming forward for that allocation, which would mean another 12 million would be allocated from that general fund balance and assigned to these various reserves.
Randy?
Thank you. So as you can tell, I'm going to be all over this, so I apologize. And I appreciate that we do have a policy now. I think that's great. I think we have to definitely allocate money to very specific things, so I appreciate that. But are these going to be actual reserves or assigned, or you haven't determined exactly the
They're
categories?
reserves.
So they'll be actual reserves. They can't be used for anything else.
Policy. Okay, I'll wait.
Okay. That's
Can't hear you, Dan.
Greg?
Again, just want to make sure that I'm adding the math up right. So this $12 million fund balance allocation is in addition to the 18% of 37 million. So essentially our policy will have about 49 million in reserves, essentially.
The way the math works is you subtract the 18% to get the available fund balance, and then you start subtracting these other things out, the 8 million.
Yeah. I just want to make sure, but our policy I just want to make sure I'm on the same page with our policy. It's 18% reserve in the fund balance, plus now this 12 million.
Plus the 8 that we've allocated.
That's different. I just want to know what we have to put aside, right? Because we don't have to accept a county administrator's budget. I mean, we'll get pretty close. So 37 million plus the 12. Does that percentage get us closer to a better comfort level with the Moody's folks, the rating folks? Does that satisfy sort of the requirements of having a larger percentage in reserve?
It will, yes, it will get us.
Lori, did you talk to Lori today, Norma? Yeah, these reserves apparently count towards the fund balance that Moody's requires us to have to meet that ratio that they hook the. Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah.
So this plus our 18% policy gets us to a better position with Moody's as it relates to our credit rating. Okay.
Dan?
I guess I'll ask my question now. When we did this policy, I asked Lori, I said, is this a dedicated reserve or reserve? And she said, it's not a dedicated reserve, it's a reserve. And I said, okay, I understand. My understanding is a dedicated reserve can only be used for one purpose. And once it's in there, that's what it's used for. And she said, that's not this. A reserve does not obligate us to use it for us. It's an accounting tool.
Okay, I think Lori is here, so maybe it would be helpful if we heard from her.
I didn't know Lori was here. Great.
Hi, Lori.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
So can you address this issue, please?
Absolutely. So the reserve policy that we brought forth, I think it was this very last meeting.
Yes.
Is to establish official reserves. In each one of these 7 what do we got? Six reserves are individual reserves that you can only use that money for those purposes. So just out of the gate, obviously debt service, we can only use that 7 million to pay principal and interest on debt service, period, end of story. That's what you would be doing, setting that money aside for that purpose. That's what these reserves are. I think where the confusion is, we also talked about designated fund balances, and that's when we talked about that a designated fund balance, you're not tied to a specific use of the item per se. You can say, I want to use it for X, Y, Z, but if you later change your mind and want to use it for A, B, C, as long as you go through the legislative board, you may do that. But these right here, these reserves on the screen are state accepted reserves, and you have to follow the state requirements that state specifically you must use the funding for which it was intended.
And can you clarify for us that these reserves count in the fund balance that Moody's considers when it calculates a fund balance ratio?
Yeah, so it's my understanding that the regulations and guidelines for Moody's has changed slightly, and she will be coming to our next, I can't think of her name right now, I think it's Suzanne from Moody's, will be attending the next legislative meeting on October 3rd to talk about the new changes. And it's my understanding that they will be looking not only at your fund balance, but also the level of reserves that you have established combined.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. Okay, can we move on to Randy's next question? Sorry, Randy. You are all over this, I know.
And I just want to clarify with Lori, I just want to clarify with you, the contingent fund reserve, however, is intended for contingent. So if there is something that has to be spent, that is a little bit more flexible than any of the other reserves. Am I right or no?
So what we'll do is we'll have a contingency account that you will put in the budget. So I'm just going to make up a number because I don't know what you put in there this year, but let's just say you said $100,000 will be in our contingency account that you're budgeting for. So we would take $100,000 out of this fund, this reserve, this contingent fund reserve, and you'd have that $100,000 in your budget in the year to use for things that go over that you need to use. And then if you use that all up and you have to have more than 100,000, you can go back to this reserve to use for contingency. But it has to go straight from this reserve to the contingency account. You can't just say, oh, I'm going to take it from the reserve and I'm going to give it to county administrator so they can hire a new person or whatever. You know, it's got to follow the path.
Thank you.
And so the issue that we have faced over the past few years has been that we have created a contingent fund, and then towards the middle to the end of the year, we end up adding considerably because we've spent it down. This contingent fund reserve will eliminate that problem, at least on a year-by-year basis.
And this is based on a 3-year average of our expenditures.
Okay. So I've got Dan, and then I've got Greg.
So maybe this is the same question Greg asked a little while ago, but now that I've heard different information, I need to ask it in my way. Did our new policy say that we will maintain an 18% reserve fund balance plus all this reserve money? Is that what the policy said?
I would.
Want me to answer that?
Yes, please.
Okay. So there's two different policies. One is the reserve policy that we brought forth I think it was the last meeting. That's what this is that's up on the screen. We also discussed looking at our fund balance policy going forward. That has not come forth to you. I did an educational presentation about what fund balance policy was versus reserve. And in that, we talked about some things we might want to look at as we look at the fund balance policy, which will be coming, I believe, next meeting.
It'll be
So you
coming to
haven't-
BCP on October 18th, but it won't come to the legislature until its first November meeting.
Okay, so that's fine, thank you. So what I'm asking is this. Right now, we have a policy that says we have to set aside 18%, which we just learned is $37 million roughly. Is there a policy right now that says we have to set aside $37 million plus $12 million?
There are two policies that say that.
Different question,
Yeah,
what you're asking.
is there some reason we cannot say this is part of our 37 million?
Is there a policy that precludes that from being the assumption?
I don't know.
Well, would you like me to speak?
Yeah, please, Lori. I think we're having difficulty understanding how reserve accounts fit into fund balance. Is that a fair statement, gentlemen?
I think so.
Okay.
Okay, so the reserve accounts, maybe the easiest way to think about it is this year, 2023. 2023, we're going to bring to you a resolution that's going to have these figures on it, and we're going to say we're going to set aside this money. This 12 million is being set aside in 2023. So then, when you get to the end of the year and you look at what your percentage is for fund balance, that 18%, this 12 million is already going to be out of the unassigned fund balance because you moved it out of the unassigned fund balance and we funded these reserves. So the unassigned fund balance, which is what the fund balance target is based on, will already have this money out. But your total fund balance is going to include all of your assignments, your assigned fund balance, your committed fund balance, your unassigned fund balance, all of that will be total fund balance. But the policy for the target of what we're going to just try to keep in a unassigned fund balance is that 18% currently.
And that is a different thing from what Moody's is going to look at, because Moody's will look at all of it.
I'm sorry, that did not help, and just hang on for Moody's. I don't care about Moody's for the moment. I'm asking, we just got a number tonight, $37 million that we, by policy, need to keep in the fund balance. Is it 37 plus 12, or is that 12 million part of that 37?
It's not part of it.
Yeah, it's plus. You're going to put 12 million, 12 million is going to go to reserve if you approve that at the next meeting. 12 million goes to reserve. So that becomes total, that's part of your total fund balance. But you also have to keep 18% in your unassigned, which is the 37.
So, I don't know, I certainly would not have voted for this if I had understood that. Is there anyone else that understood when we took that vote that we were putting our unavailable money up to $50 million? Did anybody else understand that? You did. Okay.
Randy and then Ann.
Voting to increase the 18.
When the next amendment comes for to vote on this, I'd like to know if you could show side by side what we're currently reserved, so I can see what the changes are. Because we do have some current reserves, right? But we're adding we're increasing, then we're adding, right?
Did we have a reserve policy before this?
I think we have about 3 million in true reserves right now. If I'm remembering correctly. But but anyways, this is increasing that, which is fine. And that was my understanding, that we were setting up this policy because we wanted to specifically reserve things. So that's the way I understood it. The numbers we didn't know, but I think the policy was the way we planned it.
And if you're talking about 2023 reserves, the actual number, I'm going to just speak for Lori for a second, and she won't have a final number for 23 until next year, until probably April or May of next year, when they close the books out for 23.
Well, when she did a report based on June 30th date, if I remember correctly, and she said, currently in reserves, you guys, this is what you've done. Okay. So maybe it was based on 22, I don't remember, but I just want to see them side by side so I can understand what we're voting on. So,
Okay, Greg, did you have your hand up, or have you?
So with the contingent fund, let's just use this example, right? Because in the budget, we budget for contingent fund like $1 million and change, almost 2 million.
Something like that.
Right? We've bumped that up over the last couple of years pretty steadily. So if we go over that, we still have to approve spending down this 2.1 in the reserve account. And then our policy states in the next budget cycle, we will restore it back to this number.
Oh.
I'm not too. Sigler,
That looks like a Dan Cornell graph, Norma. What are you doing?
I'm not,
it's Mike Sigler.
I'm not doing it.
Mike, you're drawing on the
Thanks, Mike.
recording there.
Is he really?
Yeah, it said.
Maybe
Yeah.
it's his baby.
There's more information, if we can kind of go to the next couple of slides, it might help to.
We did have a question from Annie.
Oh,
Annie,
sorry.
did you want to?
It wasn't a question, I was just making that comment that I recall us looking at whether we were going to up the, was it 18%, or do this. And so I'm still comfortable with this because I was going to suggest and push for up the 18% in the other funds.
Okay. Sure. So
It's the drawing.
we had also discussed the potentially putting money aside for the future needs around center of government and public safety building. And this amount was just put here as a placeholder of $7 million as potential building reserves for these two major projects that we know will be happening simultaneously at some point in the future. I see we have a raised hand.
Yes, I see that. Mike, is that your hand or Hazel's?
No, it's mine. I'm sorry. I was trying to get to the point where I can ask a question text, but that's okay. I guess I'm in Dan's boat. I'm not really understanding this $12 million. We pay all that stuff every year right now. I mean, where does it come from now? I mean, we're paying that $1 million insurance, and we're paying workers' comp and all that. It's been coming from someplace all this time. Why this year are we saying, well, now we have to set it aside? I mean, haven't we always been doing that, or how have we been paying it all this time to date?
True, we do budget for it, and we do pay in part through our operating budget for many of these items. If we exceed those budgeted amounts, we're going into the unassigned fund balance. And right now, the unassigned fund balance does not have designated reserves. So this is, and the reserve policy was based on, I believe, GFOA best practices about these designations to account for these various items and categories.
And if I can, just this year, we dipped below in our self-insurance reserve and had to replenish that. So from year to year, there's these dips and valleys. So having something in a reserve account to allow us to cover those costs without having to come back and try to, take it out of another fund, because these are things we just have to pay. This just kind of gives you a little backup for that.
Would it be fair to say that when we had this vast undifferentiated fund balance, we would dip into it as needed for all of these things? This just tells us how much we need to hold in reserve for these eventualities. without thinking that we've got this vast pool of money and not considering that these are expenses and exigencies that we might have to meet. So I see your hand, Randy. Mike, is that a new hand or an old hand?
It's a new hand.
Okay,
I'm going to suggest that we okay.
Let Randy ask his question.
I just think this is a really important exercise. This needs to be done because, I mean, Lori reported we had $111 million June 30th of unallocated. Maybe it's unassigned, but in the audit book, I think we have to make sure we're using the same words because they say unallocated. You're talking unassigned. So we have to make sure we're all using the same words because it does matter.
Yeah, it does. And I think that's another thing that maybe when the Moody's people come in and Lori and the Moody's folks have the floor to talk about fund balance, we can review the information she gave us a couple of months ago about what all those terms mean, because honestly, I can't keep them straight. So, Mike Sigler?
I guess I'd almost like a whole separate meeting on just this, because this still doesn't make much sense to me. We were always paying this $12 million, and from the way this is written, this makes it sound like we're taking a brand new $12 million out of our budget and putting it to the side. And that's just simply not what it would be. I mean, all those expenses we have every year.
And now we
So I guess I'm not understanding why this is almost like a whole new line item.
It's there in the event that we don't have the money to pay for them.
Right.
Right, so we're just setting aside an equal amount of what we typically pay in the event we don't have the revenue to cover the expenses.
So we understand what exactly we have in terms of free money as opposed to money that we need. It's like your household bills. I mean,
so the 18% is essentially buildings and wages, and then this is everything else.
I think the 18% is operating expenses.
Yeah.
Right.
You're saying this is like a new line item, and it's, we paid for it last year, and we paid for it the year, we've paid for this forever. So I guess I'm not understanding why this has now been lifted out. I mean, I understand because we voted for it, but it's been lifted out, and it's almost like, well, now you've got to come up with this brand new $12 million.
No, it's not a brand new $12 million. It's just a way to earmark money that we need to have put aside for future exigencies so that we understand how much of our fund balance is actually free money. I see Mike Lane had a hand.
Well, you said basically what I was going to say. This simply gives us a visual of that money. We haven't had, in the past, we've gone back and said, well, how much money have we got available for workers' comp, or how much money do we have for debt service? And now we're going to have those in front of us when we do our budget. And I think it's a good thing.
Okay, Randy, and then I'm going to let Lisa carry on.
Yeah, I know that I think Lori did this in her presentation as well. Once you put money in a reserve, it can be moved, but it has to be a supermajority vote or something like that by the legislature. Is that correct? If you had to, I'm just saying if...
I defer to Lori on this one.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure on the voting requirements of it, but I do know it has to be for that same purpose. So like I said, if you wanted to, for some unknown reason, use debt service money for building a public safety building, no, you can't. You can only use debt service for debt service, principal and interest payments of bonds that are already committed to.
Thank you.
If that makes sense? Maybe it was a bad example.
No, it's a very good example, and that helped me a lot. Thank you.
But I think it's worth noting, too, that, you know, if you've put this amount of money aside in a given year and you don't use it, then it's not like you have to put more of it back the next year. Isn't that right, Lori?
Right. So what we're going to do is just keep following that policy. So, for example, on the self-insurance, $1 million, that's the premium that we had to pay. And if we have to have another big lawsuit, that might sit there for the next 10 years and you never touch it and it stays $1 million and we'll never put more into it because that was what our policy said. If next year you have another lawsuit and we have to pay out that $1 million, then we're going to have to fund it again to keep it at that $1 million level. Same with the debt service. That's next year's debt service. We're going to use that and then we'll replenish it the following year with the next year's debt service amount. So those numbers will go up and down depending on the use of those reserves.
Greg?
Yeah, so with your debt service example, don't we have debt service in the budget? This is just in the event that we can't cover our debt service with operating funds, correct? That is correct.
That is correct.
Yeah, this is like having debt service covered twice in the budget, right? We're just reserving for the event that we can't pay it out of what I'll call operating money to simplify things. Correct?
Right. So, right. And we're just basing it on a number.
So
could
the legislature vote to utilize its debt service reserve to reduce its debt service budget impact if the legislature so chose?
Yeah.
I believe so.
Okay.
But I will say, just as a matter, at a cautionary note, with what's happening with interest rates and credit tightening and heading into potentially 2 major capital projects, we would be well advised to keep ourselves prepared.
It didn't speak to the economics, just the mechanics of the reserve fund.
Right. Okay. Mike, is that another new hand?
No, I don't have my hand up.
Oh, yeah, you do. Take it down.
Okay, I won't know how to do that because it doesn't say that it's up, but okay.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, Lisa?
So then looking then at where this lands us, again, using our current policy, which is looking at the 2022 annual audited revenue, taking 18% of it is 37 million. Our total unassigned fund balance is 72 million. That leaves us with the net available fund balance, so to speak, of 34.5 million. We also, in the 2023 adopted budget, utilized 5 million of our fund balance toward one-time expenses. So we subtract out that 5 million in the 2023 adopted budget and the 2024 recommended budget, what we know so far in terms of what has been recommended for one-time and multi-year OTRs, subtracting out 3.6 million, and then subtracting out the 12,000,003 in our reserve policy. And if we choose to do a specific building reserve, subtracting out that 7 million, that would leave us with a net fund balance of about 6.4, 6.5 million.
And that doesn't mean that we only have a fund balance of 6.477 million. It just means that we only have 6.477 million out of what is in our fund balance that we can go out and
Excuse me?
Yeah, so that should be unassigned fund balance, and that's a fund only.
I'm sorry, I missed that last, Lori.
So maybe that should read net unassigned fund balance, a fund or general fund only.
Okay.
Doesn't include the other funds, it's just general fund.
Okay, great. Okay, Amanda and then Randy.
I just want to say that this is very helpful, and thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Okay, Randy.
My last one. So didn't we change the 18% policy from expense to revenue? Is that we talked about that, Lori, and you recommended that, I think.
I don't think we've made that change yet. I think that, Lori, explain it.
Yes, so in the presentation, I gave some recommendations of what my thoughts were. And my thought was to use the expenditure instead of revenue. And I was recommending we consider going up to 25% of the expenditures versus 18% of the revenue. But we did not pass that as a policy or vote on it. We're preparing that to bring to you at the next meeting.
Dan?
I'm sorry, I missed it. What is the specific building reserve, $7 million? What does that refer to?
It was the previous slide where we talked about the consideration of putting aside funding designated for the Center of Government and Public Safety. The more that we could pay in cash, the less we would have to bond for.
That would be the down payment, or that would be spread out over a bunch of years?
Either way.
Either way. So it doesn't include, that is the total for the projected payoff of the, no.
No, it was yeah, it was just an amount that we had based on our current unassigned fund balance.
Dan, I think it would have to be the down payment, because you wouldn't want to bond for more than you had to.
I think, yeah, it's just a way to reduce the amount we have to bond for up front, at least until interest rates start going back down.
So is down payment an okay enough term? I just want to make sure.
As long as we understand that's what we're talking about. Yeah, I think that's fine.
Okay. I got it then. Thank you.
Okay. Is there more? Or
I think that was it.
Can you go to the last slide you were on? May I?
Yes, you may.
Thank you. Sorry, Randy, I'm taking your thunder maybe tonight, asking the same amount of questions. If we're going to do all of these expenses, I do think that there should be something in here to understand what the 2023 revenue, to Randy's point, potentially would be. I know this is like casino tax. We can't estimate it, but we can estimate everything else in a $200 million budget, but we can't figure out where we're going to be over by November of the, preceding year. I just think that there should be a line in there that says we're projecting that we're going to put into fund balance X amount of money in the current year's budget. I think that's I think this is like the closest picture we have, but I don't think it's actually the full picture. And I think that's what Randy keeps trying to get at is we're looking at this, but we're not looking at the fact that every year we end up dumping money into.
So next year we'll have more, but not this year because we don't know what it's going to be. I mean, do you spend money before you get it?
Well, no, but we do make a habit of that around here sometimes.
Yeah.
We do have it for 9 months. We have the information.
We have it for 9 months. We have where we are.
I can do the math for you if you like.
Is that a hand again, Sigler?
It is.
Okay.
Because this graph actually kind of encapsulates my question. So here we are with $208 million. And we're deducting all of these things off. So my question then becomes, it says 18% of annual year-end revenue, $37 million. That's what we want to keep in reserve, right?
That's what our
My question
policy demands that we keep in reserve.
Okay. But it's not like we have to come up with $37 million every year. We have $37 million. So why are we taking that off?
We're not taking it out, Mike. We're just delineating each category of things that the money in our current fund balance needs to be allocated to. And I'm not using the word allocated in an accounting sense. It's like when you look at your bank account and you have $100,000, but you know that you've got to make X amount of mortgage payments and you've got to make X amount of car payments and you've got to save up for Hazel's college education and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
You're subtracting this off of the total fund balance.
It's because it's untouchable. I think that's why it's being subtracted off.
Right, but you're not pulling that 37 million off of the 208. You're pulling it off of whatever our total net reserve is, or whatever our total reserves are.
Our total is, that's fair. But right now, the only total we know is where Lisa started. So we're just trying to figure out for the next 2 or 3 months, how much of the money that we've got in our bank account is money that we can go out and spend without in any way invading these various allocations that prudence demands that we plan for.
No, I understand that. I don't think you're understanding my question. 208 million is what we brought in. 37 million, we already have that money sitting somewhere. So I guess I don't understand, we're not deducting that 37 million from the 208, are we?
No.
We're deducting it from whatever other number it is, and I don't know what that other number is.
We're not deducting it from 208. We need to start under the current policy. We need to start at 208 to get to 18% to know what our policy requires us to be holding on to as a year-end reserve.
So the 208 is a reference point, and I think Mike was looking at that going 208 minus 37, like we have to take that out of there, but it's not. That's just a reference point.
That's correct. That's
this
where we
isn't
start.
Math here.
Yes.
I want to just go up a couple slides here, because in the policy it says we take 18% of our actual year-end revenues. So going back and looking at this, 208, 246, 234 was our actual year-end revenues, not what we have in the bank. It's what our revenues were. And that just tells us how much we're supposed to put in reserves based on our fund balance policy. Okay? And then the total unassigned fund balance is the amount that we had left at the end of 2022. So we took that 72 million, took out the 37.45 million out, and that leaves us with that net available fund balance as of the end of 2022.
All right, Norma, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Shauna?
Yeah, I think what's interesting also about the money, the revenue that we have coming in right now is that we have a lot of money in investments. And just speaking for my own investments, it's like I have CDs that are going to mature in 2 months. I have investments that are, providing dividends at the end of the month. Like, there's a lot going on. And so it's hard to actualize when we're getting funds, what's coming in, what's coming out. And so the only way that we're able to do that is once the books are finally closed, because, quite honestly, we could have, and I know this isn't the case here, but we could have 80% in the stock market, and it could be doing amazing today, but by December 31st, it could take a complete dump, and maybe we only have $50. And so I think, if we use the same ending point every year of saying December 31st, our books are closed, we let everything fly where it's going to fly, and then look at, and I understand what you guys are saying, there's more money that we're going to have. We know that. But, the fact that we have so many different investments, we have our money very smartly diversified, it's hard to make accounting sense of it.
Okay. Annie, close us out on this discussion.
And just to summarize, and pull it all together, and to clarify, is that...
Get to the point, girl.
And in summary and conclusion, 9 months of a snapshot for the county is not like, probably, like Shona said, it's so much more complicated. We have so many different departments that get funding, and we don't always know what kind of funding we're going to get. So we cannot look at 9 months and extrapolate that, or even look at last year, because we get surprises. Also, on top of that, we get surprises. Oh, we're going to get this extra money. Oh, we didn't get funded for that. And so...
Oh, the state's going to take away all our money. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I'd like it to be simpler, but I know it's not. Thank you.
Okay, guys. I really want to thank Lisa and Norma and Lori This has been a good, robust discussion. I'm sure it won't be the end of our fund balance discussions by any means. Now, going forward, next week we have a ledge meeting and a public forum. And then the week after, we will start deliberating on our budget for 2024. I want you all to use that week to look at your budget book, whether it's online or the big clunky one. And if you're going to file a legislative amendment, file it next week. Try to get them in by the end of next week. I want to say Amanda wrote an email today that was very helpful. In the past, when we got the list of legislator amendments, we got them in order that they were filed. I think that this is a pretty tight budget year. I think that as a start, we know that this soft hiring freeze is hitting our departments really hard. So I think the first order of business as we consider our legislator amendments is that we look at any legislator amendments that would restore a position that's affected by the soft hiring freeze. And then we get to the programs. And I think we ought to do them in decreasing order of the amount of the OTR. And the reason for that is this. You probably all know the story about the physics professor with the jar and the rocks. You know, if you put a bunch of tiny rocks in, then all of a sudden you got big rocks, there's no room for them. So you do the big rocks first, and that leaves interstices to throw in the little ones. I think we ought to be considering the larger, more impactful OTRs, legislative amendments first. And if y'all don't mind, I think I'm going to suggest that that's the order that they will be listed in for our consideration.
And there's the spreadsheet. I don't know if you saw that yet, but.
Not yet.
Or do you want to mention that? Because that's.
I can, sure.
Really helpful.
From the big spreadsheet that you have on your desks, we've created an Excel spreadsheet that I'm going to send out to everybody if you want to use it, or you don't have to. But if that will help you to kind of figure out how those amendments will affect the tax levy, you can make those adjustments to that spreadsheet, and kind of like we did for the community recovery.
That's cool.
Yeah, so that'll go out.
Are you going to get this corrected with the ones that weren't right?
Sure.
And when you tally up those percentages, when it tallies up the percentages over on the right for you, when you add things back in, that figure is on top. So I just played with a little bit and I got to 3.5% already.
Oh yeah, it's not going to take very much.
No, and that's on top. So that's on top of the 2%. Mm-hmm. That would be like a 5%.
And the other thing that y'all need to remember is Lisa has promised us that she is going to give us 2 options for a total budget, one that would hit the 3.54% tax cap, and one that would hit the 5%, which is the bare minimum for a maintenance of effort budget.
Those were, just to reiterate too, those were included in the budget presentation that I sent out, because it became very obvious, particularly as we continued to get bad news throughout the budget process, that even hitting the 2% target with all of the soft hiring freeze, and those were the positions that were available at the time to cut, that we could not approve many ongoing requests that otherwise would be maintenance of effort requests, like increases in contracts and fees and so forth. So recognizing that, I did put together the permutation of restoring positions that were cut, and those increases in ongoing expenses to hit the tax cap, and then another that was a maintenance of effort that was around 5%. Those are included in the recommended budget presentation that I sent you. So those options are there for your consideration as well.
Okay, I have hands from Shauna and then Greg and Dan.
Yeah, so some of the other ways that we have done OTRs has been, if you see someone write an OTR and you want to sponsor it as well or join in on the, I said OTR, but I meant the amendment to let Norma know that you would also like to join in as a legislator that's interested in sponsoring that. What we've also done is we've started with the most legislators. So if there, say it's like OTR number 5, if there are 8 legislators that are for OTR number 5, perhaps that could be first. We know that's probably going to go through since it already has the majority of people sponsoring it. And it makes things run smoother because we know that there's buy-in. Whereas there might be some OTRs that only have 1 or 2 people and less likely to be voted. Another way, I mean, I know Amanda mentioned random. The only thing that I would ask if we do it random, whether, I don't know, drawing out of a hat or whatever, is that there is a deadline. And I know people are against, some people want to present their OTR the night of the budget, but if there is a deadline, because it's really important to make sure that our departments and our agencies know the date and the time that they are going to be presenting, because that's helpful for all of us to make good decisions.
They're not presenting, right?
Well, answering questions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess I would ask too, apropos of the point that Shauna just made, if you have time next week, review the amendments that have already been submitted, and if you support one, add yourself on, so that by the time we got a list and we start our deliberative meetings, if there are some where there's 8 or 9 people that are already supporting it, we can just move right along past that one and know that it's going to be part of the budget. All right, so I've got Greg and Dan.
So am I understanding this correctly, that based on the budget that county administration has put forward, anything that has not been recommended will need to be submitted as a legislator amendment?
Right.
Okay, so body cameras, a legislator needs to jump on that.
Yeah, because in many places in this budget, you will see unable to recommend due to fiscal constraints. The reason that Lisa did that is because
We told her to.
we told her to, exactly. And then I guess the other piece of that is those are all things that had been requested as target.
Yes, they are.
Okay, because if it's an OTR that you recommended, it's coming out of fund balance. So when you file your legislative amendments, be sure to designate whether you're filing that amendment to add something to target or as an OTR.
And I did send out a form, if you can use it, it does kind of
That's the
take you
form you
through
sent already?
the form I sent out
Right.
previously, yeah.
Okay, I've got Dan and then Randy.
Okay, first of all, we had a meeting scheduled for Monday as needed. We do not need that meeting. I just want to be real clear. Cancel that. Okay. My real question. These legislator amendments and these, the legislator amendments, where will they be located so that the public can see that?
Once I get them back, I've got a bunch of emails I've got to transcribe into a form. And once I get them into the form, I'll put them up on the website and it says the member filed.
I'm sorry, they'll be where?
They'll be on the website, on the online budget portal. And it says the member amendments, legislative amendments.
Okay, so we have a budget forum scheduled for a week from tomorrow. It seems to me that the public should be able to look at these amendments before that. That's the day, that's the only day we're allowing public comment, first of all. Is that correct?
No, we have a public hearing on the budget. Yeah.
In November, I mean, October 30th or something like that. The
But I
budget's
will
done,
say, I take your point. If you can get your legislative amendments filed by Monday or Tuesday so that that list is available to the public before Wednesday's meeting, that would be optimal.
Thursday, I think.
Thursday? Oh, okay.
And we've added a comment section at the bottom of the page too for folks to be able to add their comments as well.
About each amendment?
About anything. Budget open to the public for them to,
For the public.
for communication. back.
And so, I'm sorry, because I do need to ask you one more time, because I use my paper. Where is this going to be? It's going to be in the...
On the online budget book? On the
if I've never-
homepage.
On the homepage of the budget book.
Public can see.
Yes.
You know, perhaps it would be good if Dominic sent something out that alerted the public to where they, with a link.
With a
that
link,
they
yeah.
could- Yeah, I think
That's
that'd be
kinda where I was
great,
going.
because
Thank you.
I'm not going to be able to find it either.
Thank you, that's kind of where I was going.
Okay, I've got Randy, and then I've got Mike Lane.
First, I just want to thank you guys for doing that budget book. I know that was a lot of work and a lot of moving parts, so thank you for doing that. It is very helpful. But so OTRs that were not recommended, program or department OTRs that were not recommended by administration, if a legislator wants to move those forward, we have to do an amendment.
Yeah, it'll be a legislative amendment to adopt an OTR that was not recommended. Okay, who was next? Mike?
I just want to say that it's fine to have these out for folks to see, but as you said, Deborah, amendments can be made right up through the night we adopt the budget. And it used to be, we used to see a lot of those on the night of the budget. We haven't in the last few years, but if you're going to put it on the website, you need to make sure that folks understand that those are just the ones submitted to date, and that there is the opportunity for more to be added.
Well, that's a good point, Mike, but this is a difficult year, and I'm hoping that we as a group will be disciplined about submitting our our legislative amendments. Lee?
Been a long couple of nights. Thank you. So just to be clear in my own mind, our starting point is 2%. Any amendments that are offered are going to be stated as either target or one time. And if we were to follow the recommendations that we saw earlier, potentially that one-time money could be $6 million.
Potentially, yes.
Did I write that down?
Yeah. So a one-time could and would, I assume, come out of fund balance, yes. But a target legislative amendment will add to, yes.
It'll add to the 2%. So we're going to be watching that ticker go up if anybody proposes something that adjusts a target rather than a one-time or a multi-year.
And a good rule of thumb is remembering that every $530,000 you add to the target budget is a 1% levy increase. Greg and then Dan.
So a legislator amendment, could those specify a use of reserves if it was for what that reserve fund was for? It doesn't have to be one-time unrestricted.
We didn't fund the reserves yet.
But if we pass that at some point.
But we won't pass it till probably after the budget.
So if we have a shortfall in the budget, then we'll just be at a deficit funding our reserves.
No, trickster.
Theoretically.
Theoretically, yes. Yeah. Okay.
Like an accounting trick to me.
Yeah.
I just want to say this because maybe it's not true, but I have never heard anything different from, I can't think from anybody, that nobody likes those last-minute amendments. I thought everybody's always said, please don't do that. And we've done them occasionally, and occasionally there's like sort of a last-minute thing that's come up, like a new need that we didn't know about, and that's legitimate. But is anyone, I just want to guard against that. I don't, in the past at least, none of those amendments passed, those last-minute ones, because
The last minute one where we
Sales tax one, Dan.
change the
What's that?
sales tax estimate
Yeah,
or.
well, that has to be the
Or
last
use
one.
it out of fund balance.
That has to be
instead-
the last one, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Mike. It was often done, it was almost always done during the last voting meeting, so regardless of that, I'm not talking about that one, I'm talking about the regular, a bunch of people suddenly want to restore a position. I'm just saying, I'm a little surprised to hear that, because everybody's always criticized that practice, so I'm just saying, I wouldn't count on a last-minute amendment getting through. Really, it seems like everyone likes to be, I don't know.
We need to be more disciplined this year. Okay.
Every year, though, it's not just.
But especially this year, and I'm
Okay.
asking you, please be disciplined. Please think ahead. So I have Greg and I have Annie, and that's it. Oh, I thought you had your hand up. Okay, Annie?
Yeah, I'm all for like encouraging people to put in their amendments, but just to say things like, it's probably not going to go through, I mean, I don't think we can say that. I guess you can say that, but we need to still look at everything. You would maybe, make sure you have a really good reason. So I just want to leave that open. And so that for the spreadsheet that Norma's going to send out, she gave it to me to kind of play with to see if it, and so you can put in there one time, you can put it in target, if you do want to fund something. So that is really useful. I encourage you to play with that to help you figure out which ones you want to do, because I'm going to play with that to see if I'm going to even recommend an amendment. So thank you for doing that.
Okay, we're adjourned.
I just got, never mind.